Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been a truck driver for 17 years. I started this job after leaving a warehouse job that closed without notice when I was 23. My uncle Cole worked as a truck driver for 30 years until his knees gave out. He got me my CDL license, taught me the locations, showed me which truck stops had the cleanest bathrooms, and which restaurants would give you free coffee if you were polite. He died 3 years ago. He had a heart attack at a pilot station outside Memphis. They found him slumped over the steering wheel with the engine still running. I think about him sometimes when I'm on long hauls like this one. Wonder if he ever saw things he couldn't explain. He never mentioned anything. But then again, Cole wasn't the type to talk about stuff that didn't make sense. He was practical, methodical. If something broke, you fixed it. If something didn't add up, you figured it out or you moved on. This particular run started in Sacramento. I was hauling refrigerated goods down to Phoenix, nothing unusual. The load was secure, the truck was running smooth, and I had my thermos of coffee, my logbook up to date, and a full tank of diesel. Everything you need for a quiet overnight haul through Nevada and into Arizona. The kind of drive I've done 100 times before. It was October, I remember that. Early October, maybe the 5th or 6th. Still warm during the day, but the nights were getting cold, especially once you hit the desert. I left Sacramento around 4 in the afternoon, planning to push through the night and arrive in Phoenix by dawn. Straight shot down Route 49, then pick up Interstate 80, cut south through Nevada, standard route. The sun was setting as I passed through the foothills, painting the sky orange and purple. I had the radio on low, some classic rock station that kept cutting in and out as I moved between mountains. The truck hummed along, steady and reliable. A Kenworth T680, 5 years old, well maintained. I'd been driving her for 2 years and knew every sound she made, every quirk of her transmission. By the time full darkness hit, I was deep into Nevada. Empty highway stretching out in front of me, nothing but scrub brush and distant mountains on either side. This is the part of the job some guys hate, the isolation. But I've always found it peaceful. No traffic, no distractions. Just you and the road and the white lines disappearing under your headlights. I'd been driving for about 6 hours when I started feeling it. That bone-deep tiredness that creeps up on you even when you think you're wide awake. My eyes were getting heavy, and I caught myself drifting twice, jerking the wheel back when I heard the rumble strips on the shoulder. I checked my watch. It was just past 10:30. I still had another 4 hours minimum before I'd hit the Arizona border, and I knew I couldn't push through. Safety first. That's what they drill into you. No load is worth your life or someone else's. I started looking for a place to pull over, maybe catch an hour or two of sleep. The highway was empty. I hadn't seen another vehicle in over 20 minutes. Out here, there aren't many options. You've got your major truck stops, but those are usually near the interstates. Route 49 is more rural, less traveled. Mostly just small rest areas every 50 miles or so. I was watching my odometer, trying to remember where the next official rest stop was, when I saw the sign. It came up fast in my headlights, one of those old wooden signs that state highways used to use before everything went reflective and modern. The paint was faded, barely legible, but I could make out the words, "Rest Area, 2 miles." I didn't remember a rest area on this stretch, but then again, I usually drove this route during the day. Maybe I'd just never noticed it. 2 miles wasn't far. I could make it 2 miles. The road curved gently to the right, following the contour of a low hill. My headlights swept across more scrub brush, a few scattered rocks, the occasional dead tree. Nevada at night looks like the surface of the moon, empty and gray and lifeless. The sign for the rest area appeared again, this time with an arrow pointing to an exit lane. I slowed down, downshifting, and guided the truck onto the off-ramp. It was narrower than I expected, barely wide enough for the truck, with no shoulder on either side. Just pavement and then dirt and rocks. The access road curved away from the highway, heading into a small depression between two hills. I couldn't see the rest area yet, just darkness and the thin strip of asphalt in front of me. My headlights picked up another sign, smaller this one. Pinewood Rest Area. Pinewood. I turned the name over in my mind. Didn't ring a bell, but that didn't mean anything. There are hundreds of these little rest stops scattered across the western states, most of them unmanned, just a bathroom and a parking area. You stop, you rest, you move on. The road straightened out, and suddenly there it was. The rest area sat in a flat clearing, surrounded by low hills on three sides. There was a single building, rectangular and squat, made of concrete blocks painted a dingy beige color. Next to it was a small parking lot, maybe 8 or 10 spaces, and beyond that, a larger area where trucks could park. The whole place was lit up. Fluorescent lights mounted on tall poles cast that harsh, bluish-white glow that makes everything look washed out and unreal. I could see the lights clearly, but there was something off about them. They seemed too bright for such a remote location, and they flickered occasionally, just quick stutters that made shadows jump. I pulled into the truck parking area and killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost startling. Out here, you get used to the constant rumble of the diesel, the hum of the road. When it stops, the quiet feels heavy, oppressive. I sat there for a moment, looking at the building. There were no other vehicles in the lot, not a single car, no other trucks, just me. That wasn't unusual for this time of night in the middle of nowhere, but something about it bothered me. The place felt wrong somehow. Too neat, too clean, too lit up. The building had 2 doors, one marked men and one marked women. There was a covered area between them with a few vending machines and a payphone. An actual payphone, the kind you don't see anymore. It was one of those old Bell system designs, blue and silver, with a metal cord connecting the handset to the base. I grabbed my flashlight from the door compartment, even though the area was well lit. Force of habit. Then I climbed down from the cab, my boots hitting the pavement with a dull thud. The night air was cold, colder than I expected. I could see my breath, little clouds of vapor that disappeared almost immediately. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. It was the only sound besides the faint whistle of wind moving through the hills. I stretched, feeling my back pop, and started walking toward the building. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint but unmistakable. Coffee. Fresh coffee. Someone had been brewing coffee recently. But there were no other vehicles here. No one else around. I stopped walking, stood there in the middle of the parking lot listening. Wind, the buzz of the lights. Nothing else. No voices, no movement, no sound of a vehicle engine cooling down. Just the smell of coffee hanging in the cold night air. The covered area between the bathrooms had a picnic table. Weathered wood with carved initials and graffiti. One of the vending machines was lit up, the kind that sells candy bars and chips. Next to it was another machine, darker, and I realized after a moment that it was a coffee dispenser. The old kind where you put in coins and press a button and a paper cup drops down and fills with hot coffee. The machine's power light was on, green and steady. I walked over to it slowly, my boots echoing on the concrete. The coffee smell was stronger here, unmistakable. I looked at the machine more closely. There was steam coming from the dispenser nozzle, very faint, but visible in the cold air, like someone had just used it. I reached out and touched the side of the machine. It was warm, not just warm from being plugged in, but actually hot, like it had been actively brewing. My heart rate picked up a little. This didn't make sense. There were no other vehicles here, no one around. But someone had used this coffee machine recently, within the last few minutes. I looked around the rest area again, more carefully this time. The building, the parking lot, the hills beyond, nothing moved. No lights except the fluorescents overhead. No sign of anyone. Maybe they left, I thought. Maybe someone stopped here just before I arrived, got their coffee, and kept driving. But I hadn't passed any vehicles on the highway, and there was only one road in and out of this rest area. I walked over to the men's room door and pushed it open. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, more fluorescent lights, harsh and bright. 3 sinks, 3 urinals, 2 toilet stalls. The floor was clean, too clean, like it had been mopped recently. I could smell disinfectant, that sharp chemical smell that makes your nose burn. One of the stall doors was closed. The other was open, showing an empty toilet, seat up, bowl clean. I stood there looking at the closed door, listening. No sound, no feet visible underneath, no shadow of movement. "Hello?" My voice echoed off the tile walls. "Anyone in here?" Silence. I walked over to the closed stall and knocked on the door. The sound was loud in the empty bathroom. "Hey, someone in there?" No response. I pushed the door open. It swung inward easily. The stall was empty. Toilet seat down, bowl clean, tank full. But on top of the toilet tank there was something. A paper cup. One of those cups from the coffee machine outside. It was half full, still steaming. I stood there staring at that cup for a long moment. The coffee was hot. Recent. Someone had been in here. Someone had just been in here. But there was no one here now. I backed out of the bathroom quickly, letting the door swing shut behind me. My mind was racing, trying to find an explanation. Maybe there was a back door, some way out of the building I hadn't noticed. Maybe the attendant or whoever maintained this place had been here and left through a service entrance. But there was no attendant booth, no maintenance shed, just the bathrooms and the vending machines and the parking lot, and my truck. I walked around the building, checking. The back was just a blank concrete wall with no doors, no windows, nothing. The women's bathroom had a single door, same as the men's, no other exits. I completed my circuit of the building and stood under the covered area again, looking at the coffee machine. The power light was still on, steam still rising from the dispenser. And then I noticed something else. There was a cup sitting on top of the machine. Another paper cup, this one full to the brim with dark coffee. It hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. When I'd first walked up, the machine had been empty. No cups waiting. But now there was one, fresh and full. I reached out slowly and picked it up. It was hot, almost too hot to hold. The coffee inside was black, no cream or sugar. I lifted it to my nose and smelled it. Regular coffee, nothing unusual. Who the hell had put this here? I spun around, scanning the parking lot, the hills, everywhere. Nothing, no movement. No sound except the wind and the buzzing lights. "Hello?" I called out, louder this time. "Is someone here?" My voice disappeared into the darkness beyond the lights. No echo, no response. I set the coffee cup back down on the machine and walked quickly to my truck. My hands were shaking a little as I pulled myself up into the cab. I sat in the driver's seat, looking out at the rest area. Everything looked the same. The building, the lights, the empty parking lot. But something was very wrong here. I checked my phone. No signal, not surprising out here in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't call anyone, couldn't look up information about this rest area. I was on my own. The smart thing would be to leave. Just start the engine and get back on the highway and drive until I found another place to stop. But I was exhausted, bone tired, and something in me, some stubborn part, wanted to understand what was going on. I decided to give it another try. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was a simple explanation. I climbed back down from the cab and walked to the building again. The coffee cup was still sitting on the machine, steam still rising. I walked past it and pushed open the door to the men's room. The lights were off. I stopped in the doorway, my hand still on the door. The lights had definitely been on before. Bright fluorescence. But now the bathroom was dark, completely dark. I couldn't see anything past the doorway. I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the sinks, the urinals, the stall doors. Everything looked the same as before, but the lights were off. I found the light switch next to the door and flipped it. Nothing. Flipped it again, still nothing. The power was out in the bathroom, but the lights outside were still working, and the coffee machine was still running. That didn't make sense. If the power was out, everything should be dark. I stepped into the bathroom, my flashlight beam sweeping across the space. The closed stall door was open now. The paper cup that had been sitting on the toilet tank was gone. My skin prickled. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. I backed out of the bathroom and let the door close. My breath was coming faster now, heart pounding. I needed to think, needed to figure out what was happening. The covered area looked the same. Vending machines, picnic table, payphone. I walked over to the payphone and picked up the handset, not really expecting it to work. But there was a dial tone, clear and steady. I didn't know who to call. 911? And tell them what? That a rest area was acting strange? That lights were turning off and coffee was appearing and I was scared. I hung up the handset and turned back toward my truck. That's when I saw it. My truck had moved. Not much, just a few feet. But it was definitely not where I'd parked it. It was now sitting at an angle, nose pointed toward the exit road instead of straight ahead. I stood there frozen, staring at it. I knew exactly where I'd parked. Dead center in the truck area, straight in, parking brake engaged, engine off. But now it was turned slightly like someone had climbed in and repositioned it. I walked toward it slowly, my flashlight beam steady on the cab. The driver's side door was closed. Everything looked normal, but it had moved, I was certain of it. When I reached the door, I noticed something on the handle. A smudge, dark and wet. I touched it carefully with one finger. Oil. Or grease. Like someone with dirty hands had grabbed the handle. But I hadn't touched anything greasy. My hands were clean. I yanked the door open and shined my flashlight inside. The cab was empty. Keys still in my pocket. Nothing disturbed. But on the driver's seat there was a piece of paper. A receipt, I realized. One of those old-fashioned printed receipts from a cash register. I picked it up and looked at it. The print was faded, barely legible, but I could make out a few words. Pinewood Rest Area. And below that, coffee, $0.75, and a date. The date was from 20 years ago. October 8th, 2005. I turned the receipt over. On the back, someone had written something in pencil. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. Don't stay after midnight. I looked at my watch. It was 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until midnight. I crumpled the receipt and shoved it in my pocket, climbed into the cab and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over immediately, rumbling to life, and I'd never been so grateful to hear that sound. I threw the truck into gear and started moving toward the exit. Fast. Too fast for the narrow road, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of here, needed to get back to the highway where things made sense. The exit road curved back toward Route 49, my headlights bouncing off the scrub brush and rocks. I kept expecting something to happen, for the truck to stall or the road to disappear or something worse, but nothing did. The road stayed solid beneath my tires, and after what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute, I saw the entrance ramp to the highway ahead. I merged back onto Route 49 and accelerated, putting distance between me and that rest area as fast as I could. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I didn't look in the mirrors, didn't want to see if anything was following. After about 5 miles, my heart rate started to slow down. The highway stretched out empty and normal in front of me. No strange lights, no mysterious rest areas. Just the regular darkness of the Nevada desert. I drove for another hour before I felt calm enough to think clearly. What the hell had happened back there? The coffee, the moved truck, the receipt from 20 years ago. None of it made sense. I thought about the warning on the receipt. Don't stay after midnight, like someone had known. Like someone had been trying to help. But who and why? I pushed the questions away and focused on driving. I needed to get to Phoenix. Needed to complete this delivery and get paid and forget about Pinewood Rest Area. Except I couldn't forget. The memory of it stuck with me like a burr, persistent and uncomfortable. The 2 bright lights. The smell of fresh coffee in an empty parking lot. My truck moving on its own. The sun came up as I crossed into Arizona, painting the desert in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful and normal and safe. I stopped at a proper truck stop near Flagstaff, a big commercial place with dozens of other trucks and a busy diner and everything you'd expect. I sat in the diner with a plate of eggs and bacon and tried to convince myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd been tired, and the darkness had played tricks on me. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd seen what I'd seen, felt what I'd felt. After breakfast, I pulled out my phone and searched for information about Pinewood Rest Area. Nothing came up. No listings, no reviews, no photos. I tried different search terms, different combinations. Nothing. I asked the waitress if she knew anything about a rest area called Pinewood on Route 49. She looked at me like I was crazy, said she'd been working at this truck stop for 15 years and had never heard of it. I tried asking a couple of other drivers in the parking lot. Same response. No one knew anything about a Pinewood Rest Area. That should have been the end of it. I should have filed it away as one of those weird experiences that happen on the road. The kind of thing you tell other drivers about over beers and everyone laughs and says, "Man, you must have been really tired." But I couldn't let it go. 3 days later, I was back in Sacramento. Load delivered, paperwork filed. I should have taken a day off, should have rested. But instead, I found myself in the public library, sitting at one of the computer terminals, searching for information about Pinewood Rest Area. The library was quiet, just a few other people scattered around, reading or using computers. I'd always liked libraries. Something about the silence, the smell of old books, the sense of accumulated knowledge. If there was information about that rest area anywhere, it would be here. I started with online searches, same ones I'd done before. Nothing. Then I tried historical archives, looking for old highway maps, state records, anything that might mention a rest area on Route 49. Hours passed. I went through hundreds of pages, squinting at scanned documents and faded photographs. Nothing. It was getting dark outside when I finally found something. Not much, just a single line in an old Nevada Department of Transportation report from 1987. It listed rest areas scheduled for closure due to budget cuts. Near the bottom of the list, Pinewood Rest Area, Route 49. Mile marker 183. Closed effective June 1987. Demolition pending. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Closed in 1987. Nearly 40 years ago. Demolition pending. So the building might still be there, abandoned but standing. That would explain why it looked run down. But it didn't explain the lights, or the coffee machine, or my truck moving. I printed out the report and kept searching, found a few more references, all from the 1980s. Apparently, Pinewood had been a fairly standard rest area, built in the late 1960s as part of a highway expansion project. Nothing remarkable about it. It closed along with a bunch of other remote rest stops when funding dried up. I looked for newspaper articles, incident reports, anything that might explain what I'd experienced. But there was nothing. No strange occurrences, no accidents, no reports of unusual activity. Just a rest area that opened, operated for 20 years, and then closed. The librarian came by and told me they were closing in 15 minutes. I thanked her, logged off the computer, and walked out into the parking lot. The sun had set completely, and the sky was that deep purple color that comes right after dusk. I sat in my truck, the printed report in my hands, and thought about what to do next. The smart thing would be to forget about it. Move on. But I couldn't. Something about that place had gotten under my skin. I pulled out my phone and called Dale. He was another driver I knew, older guy who'd been in the business for 30 years. If anyone would know about strange rest areas or weird experiences on the road, it would be Dale. He answered on the third ring. Yeah? Dale, it's Mason. Hey, Mason, what's up? You ever hear of a rest area called Pinewood? On Route 49 in Nevada? There was a pause. Pinewood? No, don't think so. Why? I told him the story. All of it. The lights, the coffee, the moved truck, the receipt. I expected him to laugh, to tell me I'd been hallucinating from exhaustion. But he didn't. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Dale said, "You got out of there before midnight?" "Yeah. The receipt had a warning. Said, don't stay after midnight." Another pause. "Mason, I don't know nothing about Pinewood specifically, but I've been driving long enough to hear stories. There are places out on the highways that aren't quite right. Most drivers know to avoid them, but sometimes you don't know until you're there." "What kind of places?" "Rest stops mostly, old truck stops. Sometimes just stretches of road. Places where things don't add up, where time feels wrong or you see things that shouldn't be there. Most guys who experience it once never go back." "You ever experience anything like that?" Dale was quiet for a moment. "Once. Long time ago. I don't talk about it much. But yeah, I've seen things that didn't make sense." "What happened?" "Doesn't matter. Point is, you got out. You listened to the warning and you left. That's the smart move. Whatever that place is, it's not somewhere you want to spend time. But what is it? Why does it exist?" "Hell if I know. Some guys think it's ghosts. Some think it's time getting twisted up, like places where the past bleeds into the present. Some think it's all in your head. Me? I don't waste time trying to figure it out. I just avoid those places and keep driving." We talked for a few more minutes, but Dale didn't have any more information. He warned me not to go back, told me to forget about it. I thanked him and hung up. But I couldn't forget. The mystery of it gnawed at me. What had that place been? What had I really experienced there? Over the next few weeks, I asked around. Talked to other drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, anyone who might know something. Most people had never heard of Pinewood, but a few, the older ones, would get this look in their eyes, like they knew something but didn't want to talk about it. One guy, a driver named Carter, who'd been hauling freight for 40 years, pulled me aside at a truck stop in Reno. "You're asking about Pinewood," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, you know it?" He looked around, making sure no one was listening. "I know of it, never been there myself, but I knew a guy who stopped there once, back in the 90s. He didn't talk about it much, but he told me enough." "What did he say?" "He said it was a place that shouldn't exist. Said he stopped there around 11 at night, same as you. Everything seemed normal at first, but then things started getting weird. He stayed past midnight, against his better judgment. Said the lights started flickering and the building changed. Got older, more run down, like he was watching it decay in fast motion." "What happened to him?" Carter shook his head. "Nothing, I guess. He left around 1 in the morning, shaken up, but okay. But he said he had dreams about it for years afterward. Dreams where he was still there, trapped, unable to leave." "Did he ever go back?" "Hell no, and he never drove Route 49 again if he could help it." I thanked Carter and left, my mind racing. Dreams. The guy had dreams about the place. I'd been having dreams too, though I hadn't told anyone. Dreams where I was back at Pinewood, sitting in my truck, watching the lights flicker. And in the dreams, I couldn't start the engine. The key would turn, but nothing would happen. I'd be stuck there night after night, unable to leave. I started driving different routes, avoiding Route 49. Told dispatch I had personal reasons for not wanting that particular highway. They grumbled, but accommodated me. There were plenty of other routes to Phoenix, but avoiding it didn't help. The dreams continued, and worse, I started thinking about it constantly. Wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed past midnight. What I might have seen or learned. It was stupid, I knew it was stupid. But the curiosity was overwhelming. 2 months after my initial visit, I found myself planning a return trip. I told myself I just wanted to take another look in daylight, see if the place even existed in the daytime. Just a quick stop to satisfy my curiosity, and then I'd never think about it again. I waited until I had a legitimate run down to Arizona, then requested Route 49. Dispatch approved it without question. I left Sacramento in the morning, planning to reach the rest area around noon. The drive down was uneventful. Clear skies, light traffic. I knew approximately where the rest area should be based on the mile marker from that old report. As I got closer, I started watching for the signs. Mile marker 181, 182, 183, nothing. I slowed down, checking carefully. The landscape looked familiar. The low hills, the scrub brush. This was the right area, but there were no signs pointing to a rest area. No exit ramp, nothing. I pulled over onto the shoulder and got out, looking around. The hills looked the same. The general topography matched my memory. But there was no access road, no indication that a rest area had ever been here. I walked along the shoulder for 100 yards in each direction, looking for any sign of the exit ramp I'd taken that night. Nothing, just empty desert. It was like the place had never existed. I got back in my truck and sat there, staring out at the landscape. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind? No. The receipt was real. I still had it, folded up in my wallet. Physical proof that Pinewood existed. I pulled out the receipt and looked at it again. The print was even more faded now, but I could still make out the words. Pinewood Rest Area. Coffee. The date from 2005. And on the back, that handwritten warning. Don't stay after midnight. I put the receipt away and started driving again. Whatever Pinewood was, it apparently didn't exist during the day. Or maybe it only existed at night. Or maybe it only existed for certain people at certain times. I didn't know, and I was starting to realize I might never know. I should have left it alone. Should have chalked it up to one of those unexplainable things and moved on with my life. But I couldn't. The mystery of Pinewood consumed me. It was all I could think about. My sleep got worse. The dreams intensified. Every night, I was back at that rest area, trapped, unable to leave. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced I was still there. My driving suffered. I started making mistakes, missing exits, forgetting to log my hours properly. Dispatch called me in twice to talk about my performance. I told them I was just tired, that I'd take some time off and get my head straight. But I didn't take time off. Instead, 3 months after my first visit, I drove back to Route 49. At night this time. Deliberately. I knew it was a bad idea. Everything logical in my brain screamed at me to turn around, to go home, to forget about Pinewood. But I couldn't. I had to know. Had to understand what that place was. I left Sacramento around 8 p.m., driving through the darkness. The highway was quiet, just a few scattered vehicles. I kept my speed steady, my mind focused. I knew approximately where the exit should appear, and I was watching for it. Mile marker 181. Nothing. Mile marker 182. Still nothing. Mile marker 183. And there it was. The sign appeared in my headlights exactly as it had before. Faded wood, barely legible. Rest area, 2 miles. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My heart rate picked up. This was it. The exit would be coming up soon. And it did. The same narrow off-ramp, the same curve away from the highway. I slowed down and guided the truck onto the exit. My headlights cutting through the darkness. The access road wound between the hills, and then, suddenly, the rest area appeared. Exactly as I remembered it. The squat, concrete building, the parking lot, the tall lights casting their harsh glow, everything the same. Except this time, there was another vehicle there. A car parked in the regular parking area near the building. An older sedan, maybe from the 90s. Dark blue or black in the fluorescent light. Nevada plates. I pulled into the truck parking area and killed the engine. Sat there for a moment looking at the car. Someone else was here, another person who'd stopped at this impossible rest area. Maybe they could tell me what was going on. Maybe they knew something. I climbed down from the cab and walked toward the building. The air was cold, just like before. The lights buzzed overhead. The smell of coffee hung in the air. The covered area looked identical. Same vending machines, same picnic table, same payphone. And on top of the coffee machine, a fresh cup of steaming coffee. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed slightly. "Anyone here?" No response. I walked to the men's room door and pushed it open. The lights were on this time, bright fluorescence illuminating the tile walls and floor. Everything looked clean and maintained, just like before. "Hello?" I called again. One of the stall doors was closed. I could see feet underneath. Someone was in there. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice friendly. "Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to ask if you knew anything about this place." The feet didn't move. No response. I waited for a moment, feeling awkward. Maybe the person didn't want to talk. Maybe they were uncomfortable being approached in a bathroom. "Okay, well, I'll be outside if you want to talk," I said, and backed out of the bathroom. I walked back to the covered area and looked at the car again. It was definitely occupied by someone. The keys were probably in that person's pocket. So they were here, using the bathroom, perfectly normal. Except nothing about this place was normal. I checked my watch. It was 10:15 p.m. An hour and 45 minutes until midnight. I sat down at the picnic table and waited. The person in the bathroom would have to come out eventually, and then I could talk to them. Ask them questions. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The bathroom door remained closed. I stood up and walked back to the door. Pushed it open again. The lights were still on. The closed stall door was still closed. The feet were still there, visible underneath. "Hey, you okay in there?" I called out. No response. The feet didn't move. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Something was wrong. I walked slowly to the stall door and knocked. "Hello? You need help?" Nothing. I pushed the door. It swung open easily. The stall was empty. Completely empty. No person, no feet, nothing. Just a clean toilet and bare floor. But I'd seen the feet. I was sure of it. They'd been right there, visible under the door. I backed out of the stall and turned around quickly, half expecting someone to be standing behind me. But the bathroom was empty. Just me and the harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. I left the bathroom at a near run and went back outside. The car was still there. I walked over to it and looked in the windows. Empty. No one in the driver's seat, no one in the back. The doors were locked. I cupped my hands around my eyes and pressed my face against the driver's side window, looking more carefully. The interior was clean but outdated. Old-style dashboard, manual locks, cassette player in the stereo. On the passenger seat there was a jacket, and on the jacket a name tag. I squinted, trying to read it. The name was embroidered in red thread. Cole. My Uncle Cole. The same name. That couldn't be a coincidence, could it? I stepped back from the car, my mind racing. Cole was a common enough name. Plenty of people were named Cole. This didn't mean anything. But my hands were shaking. I walked back to my truck, climbed into the cab and locked the doors. Sat there in the driver's seat trying to calm down, trying to think rationally. But rational thought was impossible. None of this made sense. The feet in the bathroom that disappeared. The car with no driver. The name tag that matched my dead uncle's name. I looked at the dashboard clock. 10:38 p.m. An hour and 22 minutes until midnight. What had the receipt said? Don't stay after midnight. Like something changed at midnight. Like that was the deadline for getting out. But I'd come here deliberately. I'd wanted to see what happened, wanted to understand. Now, sitting in my locked truck with an empty car sitting 20 feet away in a rest area that shouldn't exist surrounding me, I wasn't so sure. I decided to wait. Just sit in the truck and watch and see what happened. If things got too weird, I could leave. The engine would start. I'd make sure of that. I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life immediately, then I shut it off again. Good. The truck was working. I could leave any time I wanted. The minutes crawled by. 10:45. 10:52. 11. Nothing happened. The rest area looked the same. The lights buzzed. The wind whistled softly through the hills. The car sat empty in its parking space. 11:15. I was starting to relax slightly. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe Pinewood was just an abandoned rest area that happened to still have power somehow. Maybe the weird things I'd experienced before had been exhaustion-induced hallucinations. 11:30. The coffee cup was still sitting on top of the machine, still steaming. I could see it clearly from my truck. Who kept filling that cup? Where did the coffee come from? 11:45. 15 minutes until midnight. The lights flickered. Just for a second, but definitely a flicker. I sat up straighter, my attention focused. They flickered again. Longer this time. Maybe a full second of darkness before they came back on. 11:50. The flickering was getting worse. The lights would go out for 2 or 3 seconds at a time, plunging the rest area into complete darkness, then snap back on. During the dark periods, I couldn't see anything. Just absolute blackness. 11:55. 5 minutes. The lights were flickering almost constantly now. The pattern was irregular, unpredictable. Dark, light, dark, dark, light, dark. And during one of the dark periods I heard something. A sound from outside the truck. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer. The lights came back on. Nothing there. Just the empty parking lot. Dark again, more footsteps. Closer now. Right outside my door. Light. Still nothing visible. My heart was hammering. I kept my hand on the key, ready to start the engine and drive. 11:57. The footsteps had stopped. Or maybe I just couldn't hear them anymore over the sound of my own breathing. The lights flickered and stayed dark for almost 10 seconds. In that darkness, I heard something else. A voice, faint and distant, but definitely a voice, calling my name. Mason. The lights came back on. I looked around frantically, nothing. No one. 11:59. 1 minute until midnight. The lights were flickering so rapidly now that it was almost strobing. Light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. And in the dark periods I could hear more sounds. Footsteps. Voices. Something scraping against concrete. And then, in one of the brief light periods, I saw it. There was someone standing next to the car. A figure. Tall, wearing a jacket. I couldn't see the face. The lights went dark again before I could get a better look. When they came back on, the figure was gone. 11:59 and 45 seconds. 15 seconds until midnight. I turned the key. The engine started immediately. I threw the truck into gear. The lights went completely dark. Not flickering anymore, just off. Total darkness. I couldn't see anything. Not the building, not the parking lot, not even my own hood. But my headlights were on. They should have been illuminating something. But there was nothing, just darkness. I pressed the accelerator. The truck moved forward. I had no idea if I was heading toward the exit or straight into a ditch, but I didn't care. I had to move. The seconds ticked by. Midnight. And then the lights came back on. But everything had changed. The building was different. Older, more decrepit. The paint was peeling, the concrete was cracked. The vending machines were rusted, their glass fronts shattered. The picnic table was rotted, barely standing. And there were more cars in the parking lot. 5 or 6 of them, all old models from different decades. A sedan from the 70s, a pickup from the 80s, a compact from the 90s, and standing next to each car was a figure. Motionless, all facing my truck. I couldn't see their faces. They were too far away, and somehow my headlights wouldn't focus on them. But they were there, watching. I kept driving, guiding the truck toward where the exit should be. The figures didn't move, just stood there as I passed. My truck rolled past the building, past the parking lot, heading for the exit road. The figures remained motionless. And then I was on the access road, climbing back up toward the highway. I looked in my rearview mirror. The rest area was dark. All the lights had gone out. I could barely see it, just a shadow in the distance, but the figures were still visible, still standing there. And as I watched, one of them raised a hand, waved. I pressed the accelerator harder, taking the curve too fast, my truck swaying. But I didn't care. I needed to get to the highway, needed to get away. The entrance ramp appeared ahead. I merged onto Route 49 and kept going, pushing the speed as high as I dared. After 5 miles, I started to breathe normally again. After 10 miles, my hands stopped shaking. After 20 miles, I pulled over at a legitimate rest area, a modern facility with bright lights and other trucks, and sat there until my heart rate returned to normal. I'd stayed past midnight, seen what happened, and I never wanted to see it again. That was 6 months ago. I haven't driven Route 49 since. I avoid it completely, take different routes even if they add hours to my trips. Dispatch thinks I'm being irrational, but they've stopped asking questions. The dreams have gotten worse, much worse. Every night now, I'm back at Pinewood. But in the dreams, I can't leave. The engine won't start, or the exit road disappears, or I'm simply frozen in place, unable to move while those figures approach my truck. I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced I'm still there, convinced I never really left. It takes me minutes to remember where I am, to convince myself that I'm in my apartment in Sacramento, that Pinewood is miles away. I've tried researching it more, digging deeper into the history. Found a few more references to the rest area in old documents, but nothing that explains what I experienced. It was just a standard rest stop that closed down decades ago. Nothing special, except it is special. It exists in some way that normal places don't. Some overlap between past and present. Some fold in reality where things that should be gone continue to persist. I talked to Dale again, told him about my second visit. He listened quietly, then said something I'll never forget. Some places don't want to be understood, Mason. They just want to be avoided. He was right. I should have avoided it. Should have listened to that first warning on the receipt and never gone back. But I did go back, and now I can't forget what I saw. Those figures standing next to the old cars. That figure that might have been my Uncle Cole. The way everything changed at midnight. I keep the receipt in my wallet still. Look at it sometimes when I'm having a particularly bad day. The warning is still there, faded, but legible. Don't stay after midnight. I didn't listen. I stayed. And I saw what happens. Last week, I was driving a different route, nowhere near Route 49. It was late, around 11 p.m., and I was getting tired. Started looking for a place to pull over and rest. I saw a sign in my headlights. Faded wood, barely legible. Rest area, 2 miles. My blood went cold. I slowed down, watching carefully. The exit came up, narrow and dark, curving away from the highway. And I swear, in that brief glimpse before I passed it, I saw the same concrete building, the same lights, the same parking lot. But this wasn't Route 49. This was Highway 95 in Oregon, hundreds of miles from Nevada. I kept driving, didn't take the exit, pushed through my exhaustion and drove for 3 more hours before stopping at a commercial truck stop. Since then, I've seen the sign 3 more times. Different highways, different states, always at night, always when I'm tired. Always that same faded wooden sign pointing to an exit that shouldn't exist. I never take it. I keep driving, no matter how tired I am. But I'm starting to wonder if it matters. If somehow by going to Pinewood that second time, by staying past midnight, I've marked myself. If the rest area is now following me, appearing on whatever road I travel. Last night I dreamed I took one of those exits. Followed the access road down to the rest area. Parked my truck and walked to the building. The coffee machine was there, with a fresh cup waiting. I picked it up and drank it. It was hot and bitter. And when I turned around, all those figures were standing behind me. Closer now. Close enough that I could see their faces. They all looked like me, every single one. Different ages, different clothing, but the same face. My face. And in the dream, I understood. They were all versions of me that had stopped at Pinewood. That had stayed past midnight. That had never left. I was just the latest in a long line. I woke up screaming. It took me an hour to calm down enough to function. I don't know what to do anymore. The rest area keeps appearing. The dreams keep getting worse. I'm terrified that one night I'll be too tired to notice, that I'll take that exit without thinking, and I'll end up back at Pinewood. And I don't think I'll be able to leave. Not this time. I've thought about quitting trucking altogether. finding a different job, something that keeps me off the highways. But I don't know if that would help. The rest area found me on Highway 95, miles from where it should be. What's to stop it from appearing wherever I go? Dale told me once that some drivers who experience these places never fully come back. That part of them stays trapped even if their body keeps moving. I didn't understand what he meant then. I think I understand now. Right now, as I write this, I'm sitting in my truck at a modern rest stop on Interstate 5. It's 11:45 p.m. The place is well lit, busy, normal. Other trucks around me, people walking to and from the building. But I keep checking the time, watching as it approaches midnight, wondering if anything will change, wondering if Pinewood will appear. I should start my engine and leave, drive through the night, stay moving, never stop at a rest area after dark again. But I'm tired. So tired. And there's a part of me that wonders if running even matters anymore. Maybe Pinewood isn't a place I can escape. Maybe it's something else entirely. Something that latched onto me that first night when I stopped there without knowing what it was. Something that's been slowly pulling me back ever since. The clock on my dashboard just changed. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes until midnight. The lights in the rest area just flickered. Just for a second. But they flickered. And I swear I can smell coffee. Fresh, hot coffee. Even though I'm sitting in my locked truck with all the windows up. 1 minute until midnight. I should start the engine. I should leave. But my hand won't move. I'm frozen, watching the clock count down the seconds. And outside, in the parking lot, a figure just walked past my truck. Slow and deliberate, wearing a jacket with a name tag. I couldn't see the name, but I know what it said. 30 seconds. The lights are flickering constantly now. The rest area is changing, getting older. The other trucks are disappearing. 20 seconds. There's another figure standing next to my truck now, just standing there, watching me through the window. 10 seconds. I need to start the engine. I need to leave, but I can't move, can't think, can only watch as the clock counts down. 5 seconds. The figure raises its hand, knocks on my window. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. 3, 2, 1. Midnight. The lights go out. And in the darkness, I hear a voice. Familiar and distant, speaking words I can't quite make out. And then another voice, and another. All calling the same thing. Calling my name. Calling me to Pinewood. The place that never closed. The place I can't escape. The place I'm starting to realize I never left. My name is Briggs. I've been running freight across the Midwest for 12 years, and in that time I've learned that trucking is less about the driving and more about the routine. You learn your routes, you know your stops, you memorize which way stations are strict and which ones wave you through. It becomes automatic after a while, like muscle memory. That's how I know something was wrong with mile marker 417. Because it broke the routine in a way that nothing should. This was back in late November, maybe 3 years ago. I was hauling electronics from Chicago to Denver, a run I'd done probably 40 times before. Interstate 80 west through Iowa and Nebraska, then south on 76 into Colorado. Simple, straightforward, boring. The kind of drive where you can let your mind wander and your hands just do the work. I left Chicago around 6 in the evening, planning to drive through the night and hit Denver by morning. The weather was clear, no snow yet, just that bone-deep cold that comes with late autumn in the plains. My truck was running smooth, a Peterbilt 579 that I'd been driving for 3 years. She had her quirks, but I knew them all. A slight rattle in the passenger mirror at speeds over 70. a squeak in the brake pedal that never quite went away, the heater that took 10 minutes to really kick in. Traffic thinned out once I got past the suburbs. By the time I crossed into Iowa, it was just me and the occasional set of headlights going the opposite direction. The radio played country music, staticky but clear enough. I had my thermos of coffee, half a bag of beef jerky, and a full tank of fuel. Everything I needed for a long, uneventful night. Around 2 a.m., I crossed into Nebraska. The landscape out here is flat and empty, endless fields on both sides of the highway. During the day you can see for miles, but at night it's just darkness pressing in from all sides, broken only by your headlights and the occasional farmhouse light in the distance. I'd been driving for about 8 hours, and was starting to feel it. Not sleepy exactly, but that mental fatigue that comes from staring at white lines and road signs for too long. I was considering pulling over at the next rest area when I saw something odd. A sign appeared in my headlights, one of those brown ones that indicates points of interest or facilities. But this one was different. Instead of the usual symbols for rest areas or food or lodging, it just had an arrow pointing right and text that read, "Rest area, mile marker 417, no services." No services. That was unusual. Most rest areas advertised what they had: restrooms, vending machines, picnic areas. But this one specifically stated it had nothing. I checked my trip odometer. Mile marker 417 should be coming up in about 2 miles. I didn't remember this rest area from previous trips, but that didn't mean much. I usually drove this stretch during the day, and I might have just never noticed it. 2 miles later, the exit appeared. A standard off-ramp, nothing remarkable about it. No lights visible down the access road, just darkness. I almost kept going, but something made me take the exit. Curiosity, maybe. Or just a desire to stretch my legs for a few minutes. The access road curved gently to the left, away from the highway. No lights anywhere, not even the usual solar-powered signs. Just my headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating bare pavement and dead grass on either side. After about half a mile, the road opened up into a parking area. It was bigger than I expected, easily room for 20 or 30 trucks. But there were no lights, no building, just a flat paved area surrounded by empty fields. And there were trucks there. 3 of them, parked in a loose cluster near the center of the lot. I slowed down, scanning the area with my headlights. The trucks looked normal enough. All semis, different makes and models. One was a Freightliner Cascadia, another was a Kenworth like mine. The third was an older International. They were all dark, no lights on in the cabs, no movement visible. I pulled into a spot about 50 feet away from the others and killed my engine. The sudden silence was jarring. Out here, away from the highway, there was no sound at all. No wind, no distant traffic, nothing. Just absolute quiet. I sat in my cab for a moment looking at the other trucks. Something about them bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. They looked abandoned somehow. Not parked for a rest break, but left behind. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting. I'd forgotten how cold it was. My breath came out in clouds of vapor that disappeared into the darkness. The parking lot was in good condition, no cracks or potholes. Recent pavement, maybe only a few years old. But there was no building, no facilities of any kind. Just pavement and empty space and those 3 trucks. I walked toward them slowly, my boots echoing on the concrete. The sound seemed too loud in the silence. As I got closer, I could see more details. The trucks were all clean, well-maintained. Not new, but not old either. 5 to 10 years old, I'd guess. I approached the Freightliner first. The cab was dark, windows tinted. I shined my flashlight through the driver's side window, cupping my hand around my eyes to block the reflection. The cab was empty. No driver, no personal belongings visible. The seats were clean, the dashboard clear, like someone had just climbed out and walked away, taking everything with them. I tried the door handle. Locked. I moved to the Kenworth. Same thing. Empty cab, locked door, no sign of the driver. The third truck, the International, was identical. Empty and locked. But all three engines were running. I hadn't noticed it at first because they were idling so quietly, but once I paid attention, I could hear the faint rumble of diesel engines. All three trucks were running. Heat probably on to keep the cabs warm, but no drivers anywhere. That wasn't right. You don't leave a truck running and wander off. It's basic safety, basic common sense. And you definitely don't leave it locked with the engine on. I stood there in the middle of the parking lot looking around. The fields surrounding the rest area were completely dark. No lights, no buildings, nothing. Just empty Nebraska prairie stretching out in all directions. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat, dead, like the darkness was swallowing the sound. "Anyone here?" No response. I walked around the entire parking area, shining my flashlight into the darkness, looking for a building, a restroom, anything that might explain why this place existed. But there was nothing, just pavement and grass and darkness. When I completed the circuit and came back to my truck, I noticed something that made my skin prickle. There were now 4 trucks in the parking lot. Mine, the Freightliner, the Kenworth, the International, and a 4th one that definitely hadn't been there before. A Volvo VNL, parked about 30 feet from the International. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I'd just walked around the entire parking lot. There had been 3 trucks, now there were 4, and I hadn't heard anything. No engine sounds, no vehicle approaching, nothing. The Volvo's engine was running just like the others. The cab was dark. I walked toward it slowly, my heart rate picking up. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I approached the driver's side and shined my flashlight through the window. Empty. No driver. Locked door. I backed away from the truck and turned in a slow circle, scanning the entire area. There was no way that truck had driven in without me noticing. The access road was the only way in or out, and I'd been standing right here. I would have seen headlights, heard the engine, but I hadn't. The truck had just appeared. I walked quickly back to my Peterbilt and climbed into the cab, locking the doors behind me. My hands were shaking slightly as I started the engine. The familiar rumble was comforting, normal, real. I needed to leave. This place was wrong. I put the truck in gear and started moving toward the exit. The access road stretched out ahead of me in my headlights, the same curved route I'd taken to get here. As I drove past the cluster of trucks, I checked my side mirror. 4 trucks, all running, all empty, and standing next to the Volvo, barely visible in the darkness beyond my taillights, was a figure. Just standing there, motionless, watching me leave. I pressed the accelerator harder, taking the curve faster than I should have. The access road seemed longer than I remembered, stretching out endlessly in my headlights. But finally, I saw the entrance ramp to the interstate ahead. I merged back onto I-80 and didn't look back, just kept driving west, putting distance between me and mile marker 417. After 10 miles, my hands stopped shaking. After 20 miles, I could think clearly again. After 50 miles, I started trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe the trucks belonged to drivers who were carpooling. Maybe they'd left them there and caught a ride with someone else. That would explain the running engines and the locked doors. But it didn't explain the 4th truck appearing out of nowhere, or the figure I'd seen in my mirror. I drove until dawn, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to gray to pale blue. By the time I reached Denver, I'd almost convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, that the fatigue had played tricks on my perception. Almost. But I couldn't shake the memory of those trucks. The way they'd been running with no drivers, the way that fourth truck had just appeared, and I couldn't forget the figure I'd seen, standing there in the darkness, watching. I completed my delivery in Denver and filed my paperwork. Everything was normal. The load matched the manifest, the weight was correct, the timestamp was accurate. Just another run, another delivery. But when I looked at my logbook later that night, I noticed something strange. There was a gap in my entries, a 2-hour window that I couldn't account for. According to my log, I'd stopped at mile marker 417 at 2:15 a.m., and I'd gotten back on the interstate at 4:30 a.m. 2 hours and 15 minutes, but I'd only been there for maybe 20 minutes, 30 at most. I'd walked around the parking lot, checked the trucks, and left. Not even half an hour. Where had those 2 hours gone? I checked my phone. The clock matched the logbook. 4:30 a.m. when I got back on the highway. I looked at the timestamp on a text message I'd sent just before taking the exit. 2:10 a.m. The numbers didn't lie. I'd lost 2 hours at mile marker 417, and I had no memory of where they'd gone. I should have reported it. Should have called dispatch, told them about the missing time, asked if anyone else had experienced something similar. But I didn't, because how do you explain losing 2 hours? How do you tell someone that you stopped at a rest area that shouldn't exist and time just disappeared? They'd think I was using drugs, or having a breakdown, or lying to cover up some mistake. Any of those options would end with me losing my license, losing my job, losing everything I'd built over 12 years of driving. So I kept quiet, did my job, drove my routes, tried not to think about it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The missing time haunted me. I'd go over that night again and again in my head, trying to find those lost hours. But there was nothing. Just a blank space in my memory where 2 hours should have been. I started having dreams about it. Dreams where I was back in that parking lot, walking among those running trucks, searching for something I couldn't name. In the dreams, there were more trucks. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All running, all empty, filling the darkness as far as I could see. And in every dream, there were figures. Standing between the trucks. Motionless. Watching me with faces I could never quite see. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced I was still there. Still lost in that empty parking lot at mile marker 417. 3 weeks after my first visit, I had another run from Chicago to Denver. Same route, same basic schedule. I left in the evening, drove through the night. And at 2 a.m., I found myself approaching the Nebraska border. I told myself I wouldn't stop. I'd drive straight through, ignore the exit, forget about mile marker 417. Whatever had happened there, I didn't need to understand it. I just needed to stay away. But as I got closer, I felt a pull, an almost physical sensation, like something was drawing me toward that exit. Not forcing me, just suggesting, inviting. Mile marker 415, then 416, then 417, and there was the sign. The same brown sign with the arrow. Rest area. Mile marker 417. No services. My hands turned the wheel before I consciously decided to. The truck took the exit, following the curved access road into the darkness. The parking lot appeared, exactly as I remembered it. Flat pavement, no lights, surrounded by empty fields. And trucks. More this time. 7 or 8 of them, scattered across the lot. I pulled in and killed the engine, sat there in the darkness, listening to the tick of the cooling motor. The trucks around me were all running, their engines a low rumble that I could feel through my steering wheel. I checked my watch, 2:15 a.m., exactly the same time as before. I climbed down from the cab, my flashlight in hand. The cold was just as sharp, the silence just as complete. I walked toward the nearest truck, a Mack Anthem that looked almost new. The cab was empty, engine running, door locked. I moved to the next truck, same thing, and the next, and the next. Every single truck in the lot was running with no driver, locked and empty. But this time, I noticed something else. On the passenger seat of one truck, there was a jacket, a worn denim jacket with a company logo on the back. And on the dashboard of another, there was a coffee mug, still steaming. These trucks weren't abandoned. The drivers were somewhere. Recently, somewhere. Their belongings were still here, still fresh. "Hello?" I called out, louder this time. "Where is everyone?" My voice disappeared into the darkness. No echo, no response. Just silence. I walked to the edge of the parking lot and shined my flashlight out into the fields. Nothing. Just empty prairie, dead grass, darkness extending forever. When I turned back, there was another truck in the lot. I was sure of it. There had been 7, maybe 8. Now there were 9. A bright red Freightliner that definitely hadn't been there before. I walked toward it, my pulse quickening. The engine was running. The cab was empty. But on the driver's seat there was something. A piece of paper. I tried the door handle. Locked, like all the others. I pressed my face against the window, shining my flashlight inside, trying to see what the paper said. The writing was small, handwritten. I could only make out a few words. Security camera and monitor and watch yourself. Security camera? There were no cameras here. No building, no facilities. Nothing but trucks and pavement. I walked around the parking lot, looking up, searching for cameras. But there was nothing. Just empty poles that might have once held lights, but no cameras, no signs of surveillance. When I came back to my truck, I stopped. There was something in my driver's seat that hadn't been there before. A small monitor, about the size of a tablet, sitting right where I'd been sitting 15 minutes ago. I opened the door slowly. The monitor's screen was on, glowing faintly blue in the darkness. I picked it up, my hands shaking slightly. It was a security camera feed. Black and white, grainy, showing a parking lot. This parking lot. I could see all the trucks, their shapes barely visible in the darkness. And I could see myself, standing next to my truck, holding the monitor. I lowered the monitor and looked around. Where was the camera? Where was this feed coming from? I looked back at the screen. The image showed me looking around, confused. And there, in the corner of the screen, barely visible, was something else. A figure, standing at the edge of the parking lot just beyond the range of the parked trucks. I spun around, looking in the direction where the figure should be. Nothing, just darkness. I looked back at the screen. The figure was still there, but it was closer now. It had moved toward the center of the lot, moving between the trucks. I scanned the parking lot with my eyes. No figure, no movement, just trucks and darkness. The screen showed something different. The figure was closer still, maybe only 30 feet away from me. Close enough that I should be able to see it, if it was really there. But when I looked up from the monitor, there was nothing. I set the monitor down on my seat and backed away from the truck, my flashlight sweeping across the parking lot. Empty. Everything was empty, but I could feel it. Something was watching me. Something was here, even if I couldn't see it. I climbed back into my truck and locked the doors. My hands fumbled with the keys as I started the engine. It rumbled to life, and I'd never been so relieved to hear that sound. I threw the truck into gear and started moving toward the exit. As I drove past the cluster of trucks, I glanced at the monitor still sitting on my seat. The screen showed me driving away, and it showed the figure standing in the middle of the parking lot, watching my truck leave. But it also showed something else, something that made my blood run cold. On the screen, my truck wasn't moving. It was still parked in the lot, engine running, empty. I was seeing myself on the monitor walking around the parking lot. Still there, still trapped in that place. I looked up at the windshield. I was driving. The access road was right there in my headlights. I was moving, but the monitor showed something different. I grabbed it and threw it out the window. Heard it shatter on the pavement behind me. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. The access road stretched out ahead of me, and I pushed the accelerator down, taking the curves too fast. But I didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. The entrance ramp to I-80 appeared ahead, and I merged onto the highway, westbound, away from mile marker 417. I drove for hours without stopping. Couldn't stop. Every time I saw an exit or a rest area, I'd feel that pull again, that suggestion that I should stop, should rest, should check if maybe I was still back there, trapped in that parking lot. I made it to Denver by dawn, exhausted and shaken. Completed my delivery on autopilot, my mind elsewhere. And when I checked my logbook later, I found the same thing, a gap in my entries. This time, 3 hours were missing. I'd arrived back on the highway at 5:30 a.m., but I'd taken the exit at 2:15 a.m. 3 hours and 15 minutes. And in my logbook, written in my own handwriting but with words I didn't remember writing, there was a note. Counted 47 trucks, all empty, all waiting. I stared at that note for a long time. My handwriting, my pen, but I had no memory of writing it. 47 trucks. I'd only seen maybe 9 or 10, but apparently at some point during those lost hours I'd counted 47. What else had happened during that time? What else had I seen or done that I couldn't remember? And why was my truck still showing up on that security monitor, still parked in that lot, even as I drove away? I started researching mile marker 417 as soon as I got back to Chicago. Spent hours online, searching for any mention of a rest area at that location. Nothing. No official records, no maps showing a facility there, no reviews or mentions from other drivers. I tried calling the Nebraska Department of Transportation. Asked about rest areas on Interstate 80. They sent me a list. Mile marker 417 wasn't on it. I checked historical records, old maps, archived documents. Nothing. As far as any official source was concerned, there was no rest area at mile marker 417, but I'd been there twice, and I had proof, the missing time in my logbook, the note I'd written but couldn't remember writing. I started asking other drivers, carefully, casually, trying not to sound crazy. Had anyone ever stopped at a rest area near mile marker 417 in Nebraska? Had anyone experienced missing time or strange occurrences on I-80? Most guys looked at me like I was nuts. A few told me I should get more sleep. One guy, an older driver named Hayes who'd been running freight for 30 years, pulled me aside. "You talking about that place with no lights?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, you know it?" Hayes nodded slowly. "Stopped there once, about 10 years ago. Only once. What happened? Lost time. Couple hours I couldn't account for. And when I checked my truck afterward, the odometer didn't match. I'd driven an extra 100 miles, but I had no memory of it. Did you go back? Hell no. Whatever that place is, it's not somewhere you want to spend time. I don't drive that route anymore if I can help it. What do you think it is?" Hayes shook his head. "Don't know. Don't want to know." Some places on the highways, they're not quite right. Most drivers learn to sense them, avoid them. You get a feeling, you know? like the air is wrong or the light is weird or something just doesn't add up. You learn to trust that feeling. But why does it exist? What's the purpose? Purpose. Hayes laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think places like that have a purpose? They just are. They exist in the cracks, in the spaces between things. Best thing you can do is stay away. But I couldn't stay away. The more I learned, the more I needed to understand. And I kept having those dreams. Dreams where I was still there, still in that parking lot, walking among an endless sea of trucks. I made a decision. I would go back one more time. But this time, I'd be prepared. I'd bring a camera, recording equipment, a GPS tracker. I'd document everything. Prove that the place existed, figure out what was happening there. It took me 2 weeks to put together the equipment. A dash cam, a handheld video camera, a GPS tracker, a digital voice recorder. Everything I'd need to capture evidence. I waited until I had another run to Denver. Same route, same schedule. But this time I was ready. I left Chicago in the evening, driving through the familiar darkness. As I crossed into Nebraska, I turned on all my recording equipment. The dashcam recorded the road ahead. The GPS tracker logged my position. The voice recorder captured any sounds. Mile marker 415. I could feel the pull already, that gentle suggestion that I should stop, that I should visit. Mile marker 416. My hands tightened on the wheel, not from fear now, but from anticipation. I was going to document this, going to prove it was real. Mile marker 417. And there was the sign, exactly where it should be. Rest area, mile marker 417, no services. I took the exit, following the access road. The dashcam recorded everything. The curve, the empty fields, the darkness. The parking lot appeared, and I stopped the truck at the entrance, letting the camera capture the scene. There were trucks there, dozens of them, more than I'd seen before, all running, all dark, all empty. I drove slowly into the lot, counting as I went. 20 trucks. 25, 30. I stopped counting at 47. 47 trucks, the same number I'd written in my logbook. I parked at the edge of the lot and checked my equipment. Everything was still recording. The GPS showed my exact position. The voice recorder was capturing the absolute silence. I grabbed my handheld camera and climbed down from the cab. It was 2:15 a.m., exactly as before. The cold was the same. The silence was the same. Everything was the same. I walked through the parking lot, filming everything. The trucks, the empty cabs, the running engines. I narrated as I went, describing what I was seeing, making sure to capture every detail. Some of the trucks looked familiar. I was sure I'd seen them before, on previous visits, but others were new, different makes, different colors. I reached the center of the lot and stopped, turning in a slow circle with the camera, documenting everything. And that's when I saw it. One of the trucks had something in the driver's seat, a monitor just like the one I'd thrown away. I walked toward it, my heart pounding. The truck was a Kenworth, newer model, Washington state plates. The engine was running. The cab was empty except for that monitor. I tried the door, locked. I held my camera up to the window, filming the monitor's screen. It was showing security camera footage just like before. The parking lot, all the trucks, everything. And there I was, standing next to the Kenworth, filming through the window. I stepped back from the truck and looked around. Where was the camera? Where was this feed coming from? I scanned the parking lot looking for camera poles, surveillance equipment, anything. But there was nothing. I looked back at the monitor through the window. The image had changed. It was now showing multiple angles of the parking lot. 4 different camera views arranged in a grid, and in all 4 views I could see trucks, but not the same trucks that were actually there. These were different. Older models, different arrangements, like the cameras were showing the parking lot at different times. One view showed only 5 trucks, another showed 20, a third showed what looked like hundreds, filling every available space, and the fourth was empty, showing just bare pavement and darkness. I filmed all of this, making sure to narrate, to explain what I was seeing. This was the proof. This was the evidence that something impossible was happening here. I walked back to my truck, still filming. As I approached, I noticed something new. There was writing on my windshield. Not on the outside, where someone would have had to reach, but on the inside. Fogged onto the glass from the inside of the cab. I'd locked the doors. No one could have gotten in. But there it was, writing in the condensation on the inside of my windshield, backward from where I stood, but clear enough to read if I reversed it in my mind. It said, "Check your camera." I lowered the camera and looked at its screen. It was showing the footage I'd just recorded, me walking through the parking lot filming the trucks, but there were differences. In the camera's playback, the parking lot was fuller. There were more trucks, many more, filling every space, and among them I could see figures, dozens of figures standing between the trucks, moving slowly through the lot. But when I looked up from the camera screen, the parking lot was the same as before. Just trucks and darkness, no figures. I looked back at the camera. The figures were still there in the footage, and they were all walking in the same direction, toward the center of the lot, toward me. I lowered the camera and looked around the actual parking lot. Nothing, no movement, no figures. But I could feel them. I could sense their presence even if I couldn't see them. They were here, around me, watching. I backed toward my truck, my hands shaking. This was wrong. This was all wrong. I needed to leave. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. But before I could put the truck in gear, I noticed something. The GPS tracker was showing an error. Instead of my position, it was displaying a string of numbers and letters that made no sense. I grabbed my phone to check the time. It was 2:15 a.m., still 2:15 a.m., the same time it had been when I arrived. I looked at my truck's dashboard clock, 2:15 a.m. Time had stopped. Or I was stuck in a loop. Or something else was happening that I couldn't understand. I threw the truck into gear and accelerated toward the exit. The access road appeared in my headlights and I followed it, pushing the speed as high as I dared. The curve seemed to go on forever. I kept driving, but the entrance ramp to the interstate never appeared. Just more curved road, extending endlessly through the darkness. I looked at my odometer. I'd driven 3 miles since leaving the parking lot, but the access road had only been half a mile long. I kept driving. 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles. The road never straightened out, never ended, just kept curving gently to the left through empty darkness. Finally, in desperation, I stopped the truck, sat there on the access road trying to think, trying to understand. I looked at the dashcam footage. It showed me driving in circles, the same curve over and over, like I was going around a track. But from my perspective, I was driving straight. I picked up the voice recorder. It had been running the whole time. I rewound it and played back the last few minutes. My voice came through clearly, narrating as I'd filmed the parking lot. And then, underneath my voice, there was something else. Other voices, faint and distant, speaking words I couldn't make out. I listened more carefully. The voices were counting. All of them, in unison, counting slowly upward. 47, 48, 49, 50. And then my voice on the recording, saying something I didn't remember saying. I am number 51. I stopped the playback, looked around the cab. Everything was normal. My truck, my equipment, everything. But according to the recording, I'd said I was number 51. Number 51 of what? I started driving again. This time, instead of following the curve, I turned the wheel hard and drove straight. The truck lurched as I left the pavement and hit the dirt and grass. I kept going, driving across the empty field, away from the road, away from the parking lot. The ground was rough and my truck bounced and jolted, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I saw lights ahead. Real lights, highway lights, Interstate 80. I pressed the accelerator down and drove toward those lights like my life depended on it. The ground was getting rougher, but I didn't slow down, couldn't slow down, and finally, blessedly, I reached the highway. I crashed through some brush and bounced up onto the shoulder, then merged into the westbound lane. I drove for an hour without looking back, without checking my mirrors, just staring straight ahead at the road, focusing on the white lines and the mile markers passing by. When I finally felt safe enough to stop, I pulled into a large truck stop near Cheyenne. A commercial place with bright lights and dozens of other trucks, and a diner and everything normal. I sat in my truck for a long time, just breathing, just trying to process what had happened. Finally, I checked my equipment. The dashcam footage showed everything. The parking lot, the trucks, the endless curving road. Proof that it had all happened. But when I checked the GPS tracker, I found something that made my skin crawl. According to the GPS, I'd never left Interstate 80. My position had remained constant on the highway the entire time, even while I was in the parking lot, even while I was driving in circles on that access road. According to the GPS, I'd never taken the exit at all, and my logbook showed the same thing. There was no gap this time, no missing hours, just a continuous record of me driving west on I-80. But I had been there. I had footage, recordings, memories. It had happened, hadn't it? That was 8 months ago. I haven't driven Interstate 80 through Nebraska since. I request different routes, even if they take longer, even if they cost me money and extra fuel and time. Because I can't risk going back to mile marker 417. But it doesn't matter. I've learned that now. The rest area isn't bound by geography. It can appear anywhere, on any highway, at any time. I've seen the sign 3 times since that last visit. Once on I-70 in Kansas, once on I-90 in South Dakota, once on Route 80 in Iowa, the same brown sign with the arrow. Rest area, mile marker 417, no services. The number is always 417, even when that mile marker doesn't exist on that particular highway. I've never taken the exit. I keep driving, no matter how tired I am, no matter how strong the pull, because I know what happens if I stop there again. I am number 51. I don't know what that means exactly, but I know it's not good. The voices on my recording were counting trucks, counting drivers. And I was number 51. I've watched the footage dozens of times. The figures moving between the trucks in my camera's playback, but invisible to my eyes. The endless curve of the access road. The monitor showing different times, different versions of the parking lot. And I've listened to my voice on the recording, saying words I don't remember. I am number 51. Like I was accepting something, agreeing to something, becoming something. Other drivers have started noticing changes in me. They say I look tired, worn out, that I've aged 10 years in the last 8 months. I've lost weight, sleep poorly, jump at unexpected sounds. And I've started seeing things that aren't there. Quick movements in my peripheral vision. Figures standing by the side of the highway that disappear when I look directly at them. trucks that vanish when I try to pass them. Last week, I was driving through Iowa around 2 a.m. I saw a truck pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights on. The driver was standing next to the cab, waving for help. I almost stopped. My hand was on the turn signal, ready to pull over and see if he needed assistance. But something made me hesitate. I looked more carefully as I approached. The truck was a Kenworth, newer model, and the driver, waving at me, looked familiar, though I couldn't place where I'd seen him. As I passed, I glanced in my mirror. The truck was gone. The driver was gone. The shoulder was empty, but I swear just before they disappeared, the driver smiled at me and waved. I've started recognizing patterns in my logbook. Unexplained gaps, time that doesn't add up. But now I notice them in real time. I'll look at my watch and see 2:15 a.m. 10 minutes later, I'll look again, and it's still 2:15 a.m. Or it's suddenly 4:30 a.m. with 2 hours missing. It's like I'm slipping between times, between places. Like part of me is still there, at mile marker 417, trapped in that parking lot with 47 other trucks. No, 50 other trucks now, because I'm number 51. I tried showing my footage to other drivers, tried explaining what I'd experienced. Most of them didn't want to hear it. The few who did watch looked disturbed, told me to delete the videos, to forget about it. One driver, an older guy named Wyatt, watched the entire video without comment. When it finished, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You went back," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah?" More than once. 3 times. Wyatt shook his head slowly. "That's 2 times too many. First time is chance, second time is curiosity. Third time is acceptance. Acceptance of what? Of the place. Of what it is. You think you were investigating it, trying to understand it. But really, you were letting it understand you. You were showing it that you were willing to come back, willing to engage, willing to become part of it. Part of what? The collection. That's what some of us call it. The places that collect things. Mile marker 417 collects trucks and drivers. It's been doing it for years, decades probably. But why? What's the purpose? Wyatt laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're still asking the wrong questions. It doesn't have a purpose, it just is. It exists because it exists, and it does what it does because that's its nature. So, what happens now? Am I number 51 forever? I don't know. No one who becomes part of the collection ever talks about it. They just disappear eventually. Stop showing up for their runs, stop answering their phones. Their trucks are found abandoned on the side of the road, engine running, doors locked, driver gone. I left that conversation more disturbed than before. Spent the next few days searching for information about missing truck drivers, abandoned vehicles, unexplained disappearances. There were more than I expected. Dozens of cases over the years. Drivers who simply vanished, leaving their trucks running on the side of highways. No signs of struggle, no explanation, just gone. I started keeping a more detailed log, recording not just my driving hours and routes, but everything. What I saw, what I felt, any anomalies in time or perception. Building a record in case I disappeared too. Because I know it's going to happen eventually. I can feel it. The pull is getting stronger. Every time I drive at night, every time I see an exit or a rest area, I feel it calling to me, suggesting I stop, reminding me that I'm number 51. And my truck has started acting strange. Little things at first. The odometer showing distances that don't match my route. The fuel gauge dropping faster than it should. The GPS showing my position miles from where I actually am. Bigger things now. Sometimes I'll be driving and suddenly realize I'm on a different highway than I intended, or in a different state, with no memory of how I got there. 2 nights ago, I woke up in my truck and didn't know where I was. The sun was rising, painting the sky orange and pink. I was parked in a rest area I didn't recognize, and around me were trucks, 50 of them, all running, all empty, all familiar. I knew where I was before I even looked at the signs. Mile marker 417. I'd come back in my sleep, driven here without conscious thought, joined the collection. I started the engine and drove away, but I knew it wouldn't be the last time. The rest area had me now. I was part of it. Number 51. Last night, I had a dream. I was standing in that parking lot surrounded by running trucks. But this time, I could see the other drivers, all 50 of them, standing next to their trucks, waiting. They weren't ghosts, they weren't dead. They were just there, existing in that place forever. Part of the collection. And in the dream, they all turned to look at me, and they smiled, and they waved, welcoming me home. I woke up at 2:15 a.m. Always 2:15 a.m. now. I looked out my window. I was parked at a truck stop in Wyoming. Normal, commercial, safe. But I could smell diesel fuel, and I could hear engines running. Lots of engines, 50 engines. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that it didn't matter where I was. The collection had claimed me. Mile marker 417 existed wherever I was now. I picked up my logbook to make an entry, but there was already writing there. My handwriting, but words I don't remember writing. Number 51 reporting. All systems normal. Awaiting instructions. I don't remember writing that, don't remember thinking it. But there it is, in my own hand. I'm writing this now as a record, as a warning to anyone who might read it. If you see a sign for a rest area at mile marker 417, don't take the exit, even if you're tired, even if you need to stop, even if something suggests you should. Because once you go there, you become part of it. You're counted, numbered, collected. And eventually, you don't leave. You just exist there, in that space between times, between places. Part of an endless parking lot filled with running trucks and waiting drivers. I can feel it happening now. The boundaries getting thinner. The real world fading. The collection becoming more real than reality. Soon, I think, I won't be able to leave at all. I'll be just another truck in that lot, running forever. Empty forever. Waiting forever. Number 51. I haven't told anyone about this. Haven't sent the recordings or the footage to anyone. Because I know now that it wouldn't matter. The people who need to avoid mile marker 417 will avoid it instinctively. They'll feel the wrongness and keep driving. The ones who stop are the ones meant to stop. The ones who become part of the collection. Like me. It's 2:15 a.m. now. It's always 2:15 a.m. now. And outside my window, I can see trucks. 50 of them, all running, all waiting, all calling me home. I think I'll take a drive, just a short one, just to that rest area I keep seeing. Mile marker 417. After all, I'm already part of the collection. I'm number 51. And it's time to go home. I learned about the 217 rule on my 4th night as a long-haul trucker. Before that, I thought I knew what I was getting into. My trainer, a weathered guy named Dalton, who'd been driving for 26 years, had spent 3 weeks showing me the routes, teaching me the regulations, explaining how to manage fatigue and schedule my breaks. But he never mentioned 2:17 a.m. My name is Reed, and I'd spent the previous 8 years working construction in Oregon before a back injury made that impossible. Trucking seemed like a natural transition. I could sit, I could drive, and the pay was decent if you were willing to put in the hours. I got my CDL, passed all the tests, and started running freight up and down the West Coast. The first 3 nights went fine. I stopped at commercial truck stops, busy places with restaurants and showers and other drivers. Normal places where you could rest without thinking twice about it. But on the 4th night, I was running behind schedule and needed to make up time. I was hauling produce from California to Washington, a route that took me up Interstate 5 through Oregon. It was late September, and the nights were getting cold. I'd left Sacramento around 6 p.m., planning to drive through the night and reach Portland by morning. Around 1:30 a.m., I was passing through southern Oregon when fatigue hit me hard. That sudden wave of exhaustion that makes your eyes feel like sandpaper, and your reaction time slow to nothing. I knew I needed to stop, but the next major truck stop was still 30 miles away. Then I saw the sign, a blue one, indicating services ahead. Rest area, 1 mile. Perfect timing. I took the exit and followed the access road to a standard-looking rest area. Well-lit parking lot, a central building with restrooms, a few picnic tables under a covered area, and trucks, maybe 10 or 12 of them scattered across the lot. I pulled into a space, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment. The building was open, lights on inside. I could see a few people moving around. Everything looked normal. I grabbed my phone to set an alarm, planned to sleep for an hour, maybe 2. It was 1:47 a.m. I'd set the alarm for 3:30, giving me time to rest and still make my delivery window. I was about to lean my seat back when I noticed something odd. One of the other trucks, a Freightliner about 50 feet away, suddenly started up. The lights came on, and after a moment, it pulled out of its space and headed for the exit. Okay, I thought. Driver finished their rest break. Nothing unusual about that. But then another truck started up, and another. Within the span of maybe 2 minutes, I watched 5 trucks leave the rest area. All of them had been dark and quiet, presumably with their drivers sleeping, and then, suddenly, they were all leaving at once. I checked my phone. 1:51 a.m. Strange timing for multiple drivers to leave simultaneously, but maybe there was some kind of schedule coordination I didn't know about. I was new to this, after all. I decided to use the restroom before trying to sleep. Climbed down from my cab and walked toward the building. The air was cold and damp, typical for Oregon in early fall. The lights overhead buzzed softly. As I approached the building, I passed a driver who was walking quickly to his truck. Middle-aged guy, looked alert despite the late hour. He nodded at me as he passed. "Don't stay past 217, he said, not breaking stride. I stopped and turned. What? But he was already climbing into his cab. His engine started immediately, and he was pulling out before I could ask him to repeat what he'd said. Don't stay past 217. What did that mean? I went into the restroom. Clean, well-maintained, empty. I took care of business and washed my hands, thinking about what the driver had said. Some kind of local regulation, maybe? A curfew for rest areas? When I came back outside, more trucks had left. The parking lot that had been fairly full when I arrived now had maybe 5 trucks remaining. All of them were dark, engines off. I checked the time, 1:58 a.m. I walked back to my truck slowly, looking around. The rest area seemed normal enough. Good lighting, clean facilities, no obvious problems. But the mass exodus of trucks was unsettling. As I reached my truck, another engine started up. The truck parked directly next to mine, a Peterbilt with Oregon plates. The driver, a woman probably in her 50s, started pulling out immediately. "Hey," I called out, walking toward her. "Excuse me." She stopped and rolled down her window. but her expression was tense, rushed. Yeah? Is there some kind of time limit here? Someone told me not to stay past 2:17. She looked at me for a long moment, then glanced at her dashboard clock. It's 2:02. You've got 15 minutes. I'd suggest you use them to leave. But why? What happens at 2:17? Nothing happens, that's the point. You leave before 2:17, nothing happens. You stay after. She trailed off, shaking her head. Just don't stay. Trust me. She rolled up her window and drove off before I could ask anything else. I stood there in the parking lot, confused and increasingly uneasy. This was ridiculous. It was a rest area. There was no reason I couldn't stay here as long as I needed to. But every other driver had left, or was leaving. As I watched, another truck started up and pulled out. That left 3 trucks in the lot besides mine. I checked the time again, 2:07 a.m. 10 minutes until 2:17. This was probably some kind of joke that experienced drivers played on rookies. Make them paranoid about arbitrary times, watch them panic. I'd been hazed enough in construction to recognize the pattern. I climbed back into my cab and locked the doors. I'd sleep here for an hour, prove to myself that nothing happened at 2:17, and then continue my route. Simple. But as I started to recline my seat, I heard another engine start. And another. The 2 remaining trucks besides mine were leaving. I sat up and looked around the parking lot. Empty. Just my truck now, sitting alone under the fluorescent lights. 2:11 a.m. 6 minutes until 2:17. Okay, this was getting creepy. Why would every single driver leave? What did they know that I didn't? I started my engine. Not because I believed something would happen, but because being the only person in a rest area in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m. was unsettling regardless of any mysterious warnings. I'd pull out, get back on the highway, drive until I found another place to stop. Somewhere busier, with more people around. I put the truck in gear and started moving toward the exit. As I drove past the main building, I glanced at it one more time. The lights were still on inside, but I couldn't see anyone. No attendants, no other travelers. Just empty lit rooms. My dashboard clock changed as I reached the exit ramp. 2:17 a.m. Exactly 2:17. I merged back onto Interstate 5 and accelerated, putting distance between myself and that rest area. Nothing had happened. No explosions, no monsters, no mysterious phenomena. Just a bunch of drivers following some superstitious ritual about a specific time. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the memory of their faces. The way they'd all looked rushed, almost frightened. The urgency in their movements as they'd left. They weren't joking. They genuinely believed something was wrong with staying past 2:17. I drove for another hour before finding a large commercial truck stop. I pulled in, parked among dozens of other trucks, and tried to sleep. But I kept thinking about that rest area, about the exodus of drivers, about the warning, don't stay past 2:17. The next morning I asked other drivers about it. Most had never heard of any 2:17 rule. A few gave me strange looks and changed the subject. One older driver, a guy named Carter, who'd been running the West Coast routes for decades, pulled me aside. "Where'd you hear about that?" he asked quietly. "A rest area in southern Oregon. All the drivers left right before 2:17 a.m. They told me not to stay past that time." Carter nodded slowly. There are a few rest areas like that. Places where the old-timers know to leave by a certain time. Usually around 2 or 3 a.m., different times for different places. But why? What happens if you stay? Nobody knows for sure, because everyone who knows better leaves, and the ones who don't leave. He trailed off. What happens to them? They keep driving, they're fine. but they're different. Changed somehow. They don't talk about what they experienced, and they never stop at those rest areas again. Most of them quit trucking altogether eventually. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't, but that's how it is. Some places on the highways have rules, unwritten rules that you learn through experience or through warnings from other drivers, and the smart ones follow those rules without asking too many questions. I thanked Carter and walked away, more confused than before. Changed? What did that mean? And why would experiencing something at a rest area make someone quit trucking? I should have left it alone, should have filed it away as one of those weird highway superstitions and moved on with my life. But I couldn't. The mystery of it gnawed at me. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to rest areas, watching patterns. And I noticed something. At certain rest areas, always between 2 and 3 a.m., there would be a mass exodus of trucks. Drivers would leave all at once, like they were responding to some unheard signal, and it was always just before a specific time. Sometimes 2:17, sometimes 2:23, sometimes 2:31. Different rest areas had different times, but the pattern was always the same. Everyone left before that time. Everyone except the rookies who didn't know better. And occasionally, one of them would stay, would be there when that critical time hit. I started watching what happened to those trucks, the ones that stayed past the designated time, and what I found was disturbing. They'd leave eventually, usually within 10 or 15 minutes. They'd merge back onto the highway and continue their routes. Nothing obviously wrong. But if you watched carefully, you'd notice little things. The way they'd drift slightly between lanes, then correct. The way they'd slow down for no apparent reason, then speed up. Like the driver was distracted or disoriented. I talked to one of them once, a young driver who'd stayed past 2:17 at that same Oregon rest area. I caught up with him at a truck stop the next day. "Hey, I saw you at the rest area last night. The one off I-5. You stayed pretty late." He looked at me strangely. "What rest area?" "The one in southern Oregon. You were there around 2 a.m. He shook his head. "I didn't stop last night. Drove straight through from Sacramento to Portland. I saw your truck, same company logo, same cab number. You must be mistaken. I didn't stop anywhere, but I knew what I'd seen. His truck had been there, had been one of the few that stayed past 2:17, and now he had no memory of it." That's when I started to understand. The people who stayed past those critical times didn't remember it. Whatever happened to them, it erased that memory, or replaced it with something else. I became obsessed with figuring it out, started keeping detailed logs of which rest areas had which times, started timing my stops so I could observe without staying too long myself. And slowly, over months of watching and documenting, I began to see a pattern. The rest areas with these time limits all had something in common. They were older facilities built in the 1970s or early 1980s. They were located in remote areas away from major cities. And they all had that same quality of feeling slightly wrong, even if you couldn't articulate exactly what was off about them. I compiled a list, 17 rest areas across Oregon, Washington, and California that showed the pattern, each with its own specific cutoff time. And I made a decision. I was going to stay past 2:17. I was going to experience whatever it was that everyone else fled from, and I was going to document it. Because I needed to know, needed to understand what was happening in these places. It was a stupid decision, reckless. But I was young and confident and convinced that whatever had affected others wouldn't affect me. I'd be prepared, vigilant, aware. So I planned my visit carefully. I chose the Oregon rest area, the one where I'd first learned about the rule. I'd stop there deliberately, stay in my truck, watch and wait. I'd have my phone recording, my logbook ready. I'd document everything. I made the drive on a Tuesday night, arriving at the rest area at 1:45 a.m. The parking lot was moderately full, maybe 15 trucks. I parked in a central location where I could see most of the lot. I set up my phone to record video of the parking lot and checked my watch. 1:47 a.m., 30 minutes until 2:17. And then I waited. The first trucks started leaving at 2:05 a.m. Not all at once, but in quick succession. I watched as engines fired up and vehicles pulled out, heading for the exit. Their movements were efficient, practiced. Drivers who'd done this before. By 2:10, the parking lot was half empty. The remaining drivers were getting ready to leave. I could see them moving in their cabs, checking mirrors, preparing to go. 2:12 a.m. A truck next to mine started up. The driver, a heavyset man with a gray beard, glanced at my truck as he pulled out. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw concern in his expression. He shook his head slightly, like he was disappointed in me, then drove away. 2:14 a.m. 3 minutes until 2:17. Only 2 other trucks remained besides mine. As I watched, they both started up simultaneously and headed for the exit. I was alone now, just my truck in a parking lot designed for 30 vehicles. The lights overhead seemed brighter somehow, more harsh. The shadows between the light pools seemed darker. I checked my phone. The video was recording properly, showing the empty parking lot. Everything looked normal. 2:16 a.m., 1 minute. I gripped my steering wheel, my eyes scanning the parking lot, the building, the surrounding darkness, waiting for something to happen. An attack, a phenomenon, something that would explain why everyone fled. My dashboard clock changed. 2:17 a.m. Nothing happened. The lights stayed on. The building remained dark and empty. The parking lot was unchanged. Just me sitting in my truck, watching and waiting. I felt almost disappointed. All that build-up, all those warnings, and nothing had happened. It was just an empty rest area. But then I noticed something. The quality of the light had changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the fluorescent glow from the overhead lights seemed slightly different. Less white, more blue, like the color temperature had shifted. I looked at my phone screen. The video showed the parking lot, but the colors looked wrong. Everything had a faint blue tint, like an old photograph. Then the sound changed. The ambient noise of the highway, the distant hum of traffic that you never really notice until it's gone, faded away. Not abruptly, just a gradual diminishing until there was complete silence. Absolute silence. No wind, no insects, no distant vehicles, nothing. I rolled down my window slightly, listening. The silence was oppressive, unnatural. Even in the most remote locations, there's always some sound. Air moving, animals, something. But here, there was nothing. And then I heard it. A sound so faint I almost missed it. A voice. No, voices. Multiple voices speaking in unison, very distant. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was clear. They were counting, slowly and deliberately. 41, 42, 43. I looked around the parking lot, trying to locate the source. But there was nothing visible, just empty pavement and harsh blue light. The counting continued, getting slightly louder. 57, 58, 59. I grabbed my phone and held it up, trying to record the sound. But on the playback there was nothing, just silence. 73, 74, 75. The voices were getting closer. Or louder, I couldn't tell which. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I started my engine. The rumble was reassuringly normal, cutting through the eerie silence. But as soon as the engine noise faded to an idle, I could hear the counting again. 92, 93, 94. I put the truck in gear and started moving toward the exit. Slowly at first, then faster. The counting continued, following me. 106, 107, 108. I reached the exit ramp and accelerated up to the highway. The counting began to fade, getting quieter as I merged onto Interstate 5. By the time I was at highway speed, it was gone completely. I drove for 10 miles before I felt calm enough to think clearly. The ambient sound of traffic had returned. The light through my windshield looked normal. Everything seemed back to normal, but I was shaking. My hands trembled on the steering wheel and my heart was racing. What had that been? What were those voices counting? I pulled over at the next rest area, a busy commercial one with dozens of trucks and good lighting and people around. I parked and sat there, trying to process what I'd experienced. The counting, the blue light, the absolute silence. It had been real. I'd heard it, felt it, but my phone hadn't recorded it. There was no evidence except my memory. I checked my watch. It was 2:47 a.m. Half an hour had passed since I'd left the rest area, but it had felt like only 10 minutes. I looked at my logbook. According to my entries, I'd stopped at the rest area at 1:47 and left at 2:18. That part matched my memory, but there was a note I didn't remember writing, scrawled in my handwriting at the bottom of the page. Counted to 137. I stared at that note. I hadn't written it. I was sure of it. I'd been focused on observing, on documenting. I hadn't taken time to write anything, but it was there, in my handwriting. Counted to 137. What did that mean? Had the voices been counting to 137? I'd heard them reach at least 108 before the counting faded, but I'd driven away before they finished. What happened if you stayed until they reached the end? What came after the counting? I sat in that truck stop parking lot until dawn, too uneasy to sleep. When the sun came up and the world looked normal again, I finally felt safe enough to close my eyes. But the memory of those voices stayed with me. The rhythmic counting, emotionless and mechanical. And the note I hadn't written, counted to 137. Over the next few days, I tried to find information about what I'd experienced. Searched online for reports of strange occurrences at rest areas, counting voices, anything similar. Found nothing useful, just the usual urban legends and creepypasta stories, none of which matched what I'd heard. I talked to other drivers again, more directly this time. Asked specifically about the counting. Most had no idea what I was talking about, but a few, the older ones, would get this look in their eyes. Recognition. Fear. One driver, a woman named Hayes who'd been running freight for 35 years, finally told me what she knew. The counting is a warning, she said. It's the place trying to figure out how long you've been there. How much time it has with you. Time for what? To change things. To alter your perception, your memory, your sense of time and space. The longer you stay, the higher it counts, the more it can change. What happens when it reaches the end? Hayes shook her head. I don't know. I've never heard of anyone staying that long. Most people realize what's happening and leave. The ones who don't remember leaving just before the counting finishes. Why don't they remember? Because the place takes that memory, replaces it with something else. You think you drove straight through, never stopped, but you did stop. You just don't remember it. And the note in my logbook counted to 137? That's how far the counting got before you left. If you'd stayed longer, the number would be higher. What's the highest anyone's heard? Hayes looked uncomfortable. I knew a driver once who claimed he heard it count to 487. Said he stayed to see what happened at the end. He quit trucking the next week. Last I heard, he was in a psychiatric facility. Kept insisting that he was still at the rest area, that everything else was fake. I left that conversation more disturbed than ever. The place could change perception, could alter memory, could convince you that reality wasn't real. And I'd willingly stayed there, let it count to 137. What had it changed? What memories had it taken or altered? How could I even know? I spent the next week driving my normal routes, trying to act like everything was fine. But I kept noticing small discrepancies. Deliveries I didn't remember making. Routes I'd supposedly driven but had no memory of. Empty spaces in my logbook that should have had entries. Was I going crazy? Or was this the effect of staying past 217? I decided I needed to go back. Needed to understand what was happening. But this time, I'd be smarter. I'd leave before the counting finished. I'd set an alarm, a timer, something to make sure I didn't stay too long. I made another run through Oregon, timing it so I'd arrive at the same rest area around 1:45 a.m. This time, I set multiple alarms on my phone. 2:16, 2:17, 2:18. I'd leave before the counting could affect me too much. I pulled into the rest area at 1:48 a.m. The parking lot was busy, maybe 20 trucks. I parked and waited, my alarm set, my logbook ready. The exodus started at 2:05 just like before. By 2:15, I was alone. 2:17 a.m. The light changed to that eerie blue. The sound disappeared, and the counting began. 1, 2, 3. This time, I paid closer attention. The voices weren't speaking English. Or they were, but the words were distorted, stretched out, like someone was playing a recording at the wrong speed. 15, 16, 17. I checked my phone. The alarms were set and would go off in just a minute. I'd hear enough of the counting to understand it better, then leave before it got too high. 33, 34, 35. My first alarm went off. 2:16 a.m. Good. I started the engine. But as I put the truck in gear, I realized something was wrong. The steering wheel wouldn't move. Not locked, not broken, just frozen in place, like it was welded to the dashboard. I tried the door handle. Same thing. Wouldn't move. 57, 58, 59. Panic set in. I was trapped. The truck wouldn't respond. I couldn't leave. My second alarm went off. 2:17 a.m. The counting continued. 81, 82, 83. I tried the window controls. Nothing. Tried the door handle again. Nothing. The truck had become a cage, and I was locked inside it. 105, 106, 107. My third alarm went off. 2:18 a.m. I should have been gone by now, should have been on the highway safe. But I was still here, trapped, while the counting continued. 134, 135, 136. It was approaching 137, the number from my last visit. Would something happen when it reached that number? 137. The counting paused. For a long moment there was absolute silence. Not even the counting. Just nothing. And then it started again. 138, 139, 140. It was continuing, going higher than before. And I couldn't leave. The counting continued past 137, the number from my previous visit. Each number seemed to take longer than the last, stretching out in the silence. 145, 146, 147. I sat frozen in my truck, unable to move even though every instinct screamed at me to run. The controls were still locked. The doors wouldn't open. I was trapped, and the counting showed no signs of stopping. At number 152, something changed. The blue light in the parking lot began to pulse, very slowly, like a heartbeat, and with each pulse I felt something, a tugging sensation like invisible hands were trying to pull me somewhere. 163, 164. The tugging got stronger. I looked down at my hands on the frozen steering wheel and saw something impossible. They were becoming transparent. Not like glass, but like they were fading out of existence. I could see through them to the steering wheel beneath. Panic flooded through me. I tried to move, to shake my hands, to do anything, but I was paralyzed, watching as my own body slowly became translucent. 178, 179. At 180, the pulsing light synchronized with the counting. Each number came with a flash of blue, and with each flash, I felt more of myself being pulled away. Not physically, but something deeper, something essential. I became aware of another space, not the parking lot, not my truck, but somewhere else. A room, small and dark and enclosed, and I was sitting there in that room, even though I was also still in my truck. 187, 188. The dual existence was disorienting. I could feel the steering wheel under my hands, but also feel a metal chair beneath me. Could see the parking lot through my windshield, but also see concrete walls surrounding me. Could smell the night air through my slightly open window, but also smell the musty, stale air of the enclosed room. Two places at once. Two realities overlapping. 193, 194. In the room, I tried to stand up, tried to walk to the door I could sense on one wall, but I couldn't move. Was frozen in the same position as in my truck. Sitting, waiting, counting, and then I felt them. The others. Other presences in adjacent rooms, separated by walls I couldn't see but could sense. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all frozen like me, all counting. Some were at much higher numbers. I could feel their counts echoing through the walls. Thousands, tens of thousands, some even higher. They'd been here for years, maybe decades, still counting, still trapped. 199, 200. The counting reached 200 and something released. Not everything, just enough. The controls in my truck suddenly responded. The steering wheel moved, the door handle worked. But I was still transparent, still half in the room. The release was partial, incomplete. I didn't hesitate. Even in my diminished state, I threw the truck into gear and accelerated toward the exit. The truck responded sluggishly like it was moving through water, but it moved. As I drove, I watched my hands on the wheel slowly become more solid. The transparency faded, and I could see my skin, my bones, my flesh returning to normal opacity. But the sensation of being in two places remained. The counting continued in my mind, softer now but still present. 207, 208. I reached the exit and merged onto the highway. The parking lot disappeared behind me, but the room didn't. I was still there, still sitting in that metal chair, even as I drove down Interstate 5. The counting faded as I put distance between myself and the rest area, but the dual existence persisted. I was driving my truck, but I was also sitting in that room. Both things were equally real. 217, 218. I drove for 30 minutes before pulling over at the next rest area. This one, a busy commercial facility with dozens of trucks and bright lights. Normal. Safe. Real. I climbed out of my cab on shaking legs and stood there in the parking lot trying to ground myself in reality. Looked at my hands. Solid. Looked at my truck. Real. Looked at the other trucks around me. All real. But underneath it all, I could still feel the room. The concrete walls, the metal chair, the locked door, and the counting. Always the counting. 234, 235. I drove for 2 hours without stopping, putting as much distance as possible between myself and that rest area. Finally pulled over at a large commercial truck stop near Eugene and sat there, my hands still shaking. I checked my phone. 4:47 a.m. Over 2 hours had passed since 2:17. But I had no memory of most of it. Just the counting, reaching 200, then nothing until the controls released. My logbook had an entry I didn't remember writing. Counted to 200, saw the room. The room? What room? I had no memory of seeing any room, but apparently I had, during those lost hours while the counting continued. I tried to remember. Closed my eyes and focused on the time between 200 and when the truck released me, but there was nothing. Just a blank space in my memory. Or was there? As I sat there trying to force the memory back, I started to feel something. Not a memory exactly, but a sensation. Like I was in two places at once, sitting in my truck at this commercial stop, but also somewhere else, somewhere dark and enclosed. The counting room. The sensation grew stronger. I could almost see it now. A small space, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. Concrete walls, no windows, a single door. And in the center, sitting on a metal chair, someone I recognized. Me. I was sitting in that room, in that other place. Frozen, just listening to the counting that echoed off the concrete walls. 273, 274. I opened my eyes. I was back in my truck, at the truck stop, in normal reality. But the sensation of being in that room persisted. Like part of me was still there, trapped, counting. I called Hayes, the driver who'd warned me before. It was early, but she answered. "You went back," she said. Not a question. "Yeah, got trapped until the count reached 200. Shit, Reed, that's bad. That's really bad. I keep feeling like I'm somewhere else. Like part of me is still there." "You probably are." The counting room. It's where the place puts you when it counts past a certain point. Your body stays in your truck, but your mind goes somewhere else. How do I get back? How do I get out of the room? You don't. That's the thing. Once you've been to the counting room, part of you stays there forever. You can function in normal reality, but you'll always feel that pull, that sense of being in two places. There has to be a way to fix it. Maybe, I don't know. The only person I ever knew who experienced it quit driving and moved to the middle of a city, surrounded himself with people and noise and activity, said it helped drown out the counting. It's still counting. Always. It never stops. For him, it kept going for years. Last time I talked to him, it was over 50,000. I felt sick. The counting would never stop. I'd hear it forever, counting higher and higher while part of me sat in that concrete room, unable to move. There's got to be something I can do. Stay away from those rest areas. Don't go back, no matter what. The more times you experience it, the stronger the connection gets. Eventually, you might not be able to leave at all. Your body will be here, but your mind will be permanently stuck in the counting room. I thanked her and hung up. Sat there in my truck, trying to think, trying to figure out what to do. And in the background, so faint I could barely hear it, the counting continued. 349, 350. I couldn't go back to my apartment. Not yet. I needed to understand this better. Needed to find others who'd experienced it and survived. Over the next 3 weeks, I became obsessed with tracking down people who'd stayed past the critical times at various rest areas. I used trucker forums, asked around at truck stops, followed leads wherever I could find them. I found 12 people willing to talk to me. 12 drivers who'd made the same mistake I had, who heard the counting every moment of their lives. The first was a woman named Sarah in Tacoma. She'd stayed past 2:23 at a rest area in Washington. Her count was at 8,557 when I met her. "It never stops," she told me, sitting in a coffee shop, her eyes distant. "I've tried everything. Medication, therapy, even ECT. Nothing touches it. The counting is always there." "How long have you been counting?" 4 years. It started at 1 and it's been going ever since. Do the math. That's about 6 numbers a minute, every hour, every day. No breaks, no sleep. Even when I'm unconscious, I can feel it counting. "Do you sense the room?" Her eyes focused on me sharply. "You've been there too, to the counting room." "Yes, I can feel it. Like I'm in 2 places at once." Sarah nodded. "It gets stronger over time. The longer you count, the more real the room becomes. Eventually," she trailed off, staring at nothing. "Eventually what?" "Eventually, you're more there than here. Your body goes through the motions in this world, but your mind is trapped in that room. I've met people who are almost gone. They walk and talk and function, but they're not really present. They're sitting in their rooms, counting, and we're just talking to empty shells. How do I stop it? You don't. You learn to accept it. Or you don't, and it destroys you." I met 7 more people over the next 2 weeks, all with similar stories, all counting at different numbers, from the low thousands to over 50,000, all trapped in rooms they couldn't leave. And all of them warned me the same thing: don't go back to the rest area. The more times you experience it, the stronger the connection becomes. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the room, about what would happen if the counting reached some final number. Was there an end? Or did it truly go on forever? The counting in my head had reached 2,019 by then, still relatively low compared to the others I'd met, but growing relentlessly. 6 numbers a minute, 160 per hour, 8,640 per day. I did the math. At this rate, I'd reach 1 million in about 4 months, 10 million in 3.5 years, 100 million in 35 years, if I lived that long. I started noticing other effects beyond the counting. Time would slip sometimes. I'd look at a clock and see 3:47 p.m., then look again, and it would be 5:23 p.m., with no memory of the intervening time. Or I'd start doing something and suddenly realize I'd been standing in the same spot for hours. The room was taking more of me, more of my time, more of my consciousness. I tried to function normally, but it was getting harder. I'd be talking to someone and suddenly realize I hadn't heard anything they'd said for the last 10 minutes. I'd be driving and find myself pulled over on the side of the road with no memory of stopping. And always the counting. 2,836 and 2,837. The 9th person I found was different from the others. His name was Marcus, and he'd been counting for 7 years. His number was over 22 million. We met at a diner in Seattle. He looked exhausted, ancient, even though he was only in his 40s. His eyes had a vacant quality, like he was looking at something far away. "You're new," he said when I sat down. "Your count is low. Maybe 3,000? Close, 3,114. You can still turn back. Get away from all this. Stop investigating, stop thinking about it, and maybe the connection will weaken." "Will it? Has yours weakened?" Marcus laughed, a hollow sound. "No, it's gotten stronger. Much stronger. I'm barely here anymore. Most of my awareness is in the room now. I come back to this world for a few hours a day, just enough to eat and sleep and maintain the basics. The rest of the time," he gestured vaguely, "I'm there." "What's it like, being there for so long?" "Quiet, still. The counting is the only sound, the only sensation. Everything else fades away. At first it was torturous, but after a while... He paused, searching for words. After a while, you start to forget what torturous means. You just exist. You and the counting, nothing else matters. What about the others? Can you sense them? Yes, hundreds of us. Maybe thousands. All in our separate rooms, all counting. Sometimes I can hear them through the walls. Not their voices, but their counts, millions. Some are in the billions. I can't imagine how long they've been there. Billions? The number was incomprehensible. That would take decades, centuries. Time works differently there. Or maybe it doesn't work at all. Maybe we're all counting the same numbers simultaneously, experiencing different parts of the same eternal count. Marcus looked at me with those hollow eyes. Have you noticed time slipping? Yes, hours disappearing. That's you spending time in the room. Your body stays here, functioning on autopilot, but your consciousness is there. And the longer you count, the more time you spend there. Eventually, you'll be there permanently. How long do I have? Marcus shrugged. Depends. Some people last years before they're fully absorbed. Others, just months. It varies. But you've already been back to the rest area twice, which accelerates the process. I'd guess you have maybe 6 months before you're more there than here. 6 months. Half a year before I effectively cease to exist in this reality. Is there any way to reverse it? I don't know. I've never heard of anyone succeeding. But then again, once you're fully absorbed, you don't come back to tell anyone what happened to you. I left that meeting more disturbed than ever. 6 months. Maybe less. And then I'd be gone, trapped in a concrete room for the rest of my existence. The counting had reached 3,647 by then. Still climbing. Always climbing. 3,848. 3,849. I tried one more time to find answers. Drove to Eugene to visit Wyatt again, the old maintenance worker who'd worked at the rest area. He looked older than before, more frail. But he agreed to talk to me. You went back, he said. Same thing Hayes had said. Everyone could see it on me. Twice, I needed to understand. And did you? Understand? Some of it. The counting room, the absorption, the way time works differently, but I don't understand why. What's the purpose? Why do these places exist? Wyatt was quiet for a long time, staring out the window of his room at the nursing home. Finally, he spoke. When I worked at that rest area, I did some digging. Found old records, talked to people who'd been around when it was built. And I learned something interesting. That rest area, and others like it, were built on specific sites, places that had been considered sacred, or cursed, depending on who you asked. Sacred how? The indigenous people who lived in that area before colonization had stories about those places. Called them thin spots. Places where the barrier between worlds was weaker, where things from other realities could slip through. You think the rest areas were built on thin spots deliberately? No, I think it was coincidence. Or maybe not. Maybe those spots attracted development because they made people uncomfortable, and building something normal there was a way to claim the land. But whatever the reason, the rest areas amplified the effect. Created structures that existed partially in both realities. And the counting? That's the mechanism. The way the other side measures you, counts you, determines how much of you belongs there versus here. The longer you stay, the higher it counts, the more of you it claims. What happens when the counting stops? Wyatt looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. It doesn't stop. That's the point. It goes on forever, claiming you piece by piece, until there's nothing left in this world. You become part of that place, part of the counting itself. There has to be a way to break free. Maybe, but I've never seen it work. The only people who escape are the ones who leave before the counting gets too high. Once you pass a certain threshold, and it's different for everyone, you're too connected to break away. What's the threshold? I don't know. Maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000. Maybe it's not about the number at all, but about how much of yourself you've given to the room. I left Eugene that day with more questions than answers. The counting was at 4,193, still climbing, still claiming me, and I realized I was running out of time. The following weeks became a blur as the count climbed relentlessly higher. I documented everything obsessively, trying to understand the progression, trying to find some pattern that might offer escape. At 5,000, I discovered I could modulate the volume slightly. Not stop it, but adjust how loud it was in my consciousness. It required intense mental focus, but I could push the counting into the background or bring it forward. This gave me brief windows of almost normal function. At 7,500, the mental map of the counting room network became clearer. I could sense not just my room, but hundreds of others, all connected in ways that defied spatial logic. Some rooms felt close, others impossibly distant. Some contained counts in the thousands, others in the millions. The network was vast, sprawling across dimensions I couldn't fully comprehend. At 10,000, I experienced my first complete transportation. I was lying in bed in my apartment, trying to sleep despite the counting, when suddenly I wasn't there anymore. No transition, no warning. One moment I was horizontal in bed, the next I was sitting upright in the metal chair in absolute darkness. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. 10,006 and 10,007. The counting echoed off concrete walls, louder than I'd ever heard it. I tried to move, to stand, to do anything, but I was paralyzed, frozen to the chair. My muscles wouldn't respond to my commands. I tried to scream. My vocal cords were locked. No sound emerged from my throat. Pure panic flooded through me. This was it. This was where I'd spend eternity, trapped in darkness, unable to move, unable to speak, with nothing but the mechanical counting for company. 10,043, 10,044. Time lost all meaning. Each number felt like it took hours to arrive, and yet they came relentlessly. Was I experiencing time normally, or was it compressed, stretched, twisted into shapes that human consciousness wasn't meant to experience? 10,097, 10,098, and then, without warning, I was back in my bed, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, my heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. The clock read 6:47 a.m. 4 hours had passed. 4 hours that had felt like perhaps 15 minutes in the room. Time compression. Or maybe time expansion, depending on which reality you measured from. The room existed outside normal temporal flow. But here's what terrified me most. The counting had reached 10,443. Over 400 numbers had been processed during those missing hours. I'd been consciously aware of maybe 70 of them. The rest had been counted without my awareness. The room was counting for me. Even when I wasn't consciously experiencing it, the process continued. Automated, mechanical, relentless. After that night, the transportations became regular occurrences. I'd lose hours every day, sometimes more. My body would go through the motions of living, eating, showering, walking, while my consciousness sat in that dark room, counting. I started keeping detailed logs of when the transportations happened and how long they lasted. Looking for patterns, for some way to predict or control them. There was no pattern. Sometimes I'd be transported for minutes, sometimes for hours, sometimes while I was awake, sometimes while sleeping. The room took me whenever it wanted, for however long it wanted. At 12,000, I met a woman named Elizabeth who'd been counting for 5 years. Her number was at 16,142,000, 16 million. We met at a support group I'd found online. Not for the counting specifically, such a group didn't officially exist, but for people experiencing dissociative disorders. Most of the group had normal dissociation issues, but 3 of us were counters. Elizabeth looked haggard, ancient, though she couldn't have been more than 35. She had that same distant look I'd seen in Marcus and James, the look of someone who was barely present. "You're new," she said during a break. "Your count is still low. 12,406. So fresh. I remember when mine was that low. I thought I could still fight it, still escape. Can't you?" She smiled sadly. "No, once you're past 20,000, it's over. The room owns you completely. I learned that years ago, but I kept fighting anyway. Waste of energy." "What changed at 20,000? "Everything. The room stopped being something I visited and became my primary residence. This world," she gestured around us, "became the visit, the temporary state. My true existence is there, in that chair, in that darkness." "How do you function?" "Barely. My body operates on autopilot most of the time, goes through necessary motions. My family thinks I have early onset dementia. They're not entirely wrong. I am losing my mind, just not in the way they think." "Do you ever come fully back? Ever feel present here?" "Sometimes, for minutes at a time, like right now. But it's exhausting. Being here takes more energy than being there. There's just counting. No decisions, no effort, no struggle. Just existing and counting." "Doesn't that drive you crazy?" "It did at first, but crazy is a concept that requires caring about your mental state. After millions of counts, you stop caring about anything. You just are." The conversation haunted me for days. That would be my future. Not madness exactly, but something worse. Complete apathy. Complete dissolution of self into nothing but counting. At 15,000, I experienced double vision for the first time. I was walking down a Portland street when suddenly I saw both realities simultaneously. The street with its shops and pedestrians overlaid with the concrete wall of my room. 2 images superimposed, both equally real, both demanding my attention. I stumbled, nearly fell. A passerby caught my arm. "You okay, man?" I nodded, unable to explain that I was seeing 2 places at once. That reality had fractured for me in a fundamental way. The double vision continued, off and on, for the rest of that day. I'd look at my apartment and see my room, look at my hand and see the armrest of the metal chair, look at Portland and see darkness. Navigation became treacherous. I walked into walls because I was seeing the empty space of my room. Reached for objects that only existed in one reality. Sat down on chairs that weren't physically present. At 18,000, I stopped recognizing familiar places. My apartment looked wrong, alien. The data entry office where I worked seemed like a set from a movie, artificial and unconvincing. Even my own face in the mirror looked like a stranger's. The room was the only thing that felt real anymore. At 20,000, the threshold Marcus had warned me about, everything changed fundamentally. I stopped coming back fully. My consciousness remained primarily in the room, with only brief excursions back to physical reality. Minutes per day, then per week, then less. My body continued functioning. It went to work, operated my computer, performed basic maintenance tasks. But I wasn't there. I was sitting in darkness, counting, while my meat puppet went through the motions of life. I know this because of the logs I'd been keeping. During my brief moments of clarity, I'd read what my body had done without me. The mechanical entries in my journal: went to work, 8 hours, came home, ate, slept. No detail, no personality, just basic function reporting. At 25,000, I met Thomas, or rather, my body met him while I was in the room. I only learned about it later, reading my journal. Thomas was another counter, nearly fully absorbed. According to my notes, we'd sat together in a park for 3 hours, neither of us speaking, both lost in our respective rooms. When we briefly, simultaneously returned to awareness, we'd nodded at each other in recognition. Fellow prisoners, fellow ghosts. My journal entry ended with a number. Thomas count, 89,000 plus, 89 million. He's been counting for over 12 years. I had no memory of meeting him. That interaction had happened while I was elsewhere, while my body operated on autopilot. At 30,000, I started losing days at a time. I'd have a moment of clarity on Monday, then the next clear moment would be Friday. 4 days gone, processed entirely in the room. My body had lived those days without me. My journal contained entries, but they were mechanical, emotionless. Lists of activities performed, meals consumed, hours slept. The writing didn't even look quite like mine anymore. The handwriting was similar but lacked any personal style. Like someone copying my hand, but not understanding the soul behind it. At 35,000, my family tried an intervention. I don't remember it. I was in the room. But according to my journal, they'd gathered at my apartment. My mother, my sister, 2 cousins. They talked to my body for hours, expressing concern, offering help, begging me to see a doctor. My body had responded appropriately, assured them I was fine, promised to seek help, said all the right things to make them feel better and leave. But I hadn't been there. I'd been in my room, counting in darkness, while my meat puppet performed social behaviors it had learned before I left. My sister left a note that I found weeks later. Read, I don't know if you're in there anymore, but if any part of you is reading this, please know we love you. Please come back to us. I cried when I read it. One of the last times I'd feel strong emotion about anything in physical reality, because even as I cried, I knew I was already gone. The person she loved, the brother she remembered, was sitting in a dark room, counting to infinity. This body she'd talked to was just a shell going through learned motions. At 40,000, I stopped being able to distinguish between the room and reality. They were both equally real, equally present. I existed in both simultaneously. My consciousness split between locations in a way that would have driven me insane if I'd had enough self left to go insane. At 45,000, I realized I couldn't remember basic things about my life before the counting. My childhood was vague. College was a blur. The construction job that had ended when I hurt my back, what had that been like? I couldn't recall. The counting had consumed my memories, replacing them with numbers. My history was measured in counts now, not experiences. The person I'd been before visiting that rest area at 2:17 a.m. was effectively dead. At 50,000, I made one final attempt to break free. Some tiny fragment of me that still cared, still fought, still believed escape might be possible, drove my body back to Southern Oregon, back to that rest area, one more time. I tried everything to make it stop. Medication, therapy, meditation. Nothing worked. The counting persisted, relentless and mechanical. My driving suffered. I'd lose focus, drift between lanes, miss exits. Other drivers started complaining. Dispatch called me in twice to discuss my performance. I tried to explain what was happening, but how do you tell someone that part of your mind is trapped in a concrete room at a rest area that doesn't officially exist? They'd think I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. The counting reached 1,000 after about a week. I could feel the room more clearly now, could sense the concrete walls, the metal chair, the single door that never opened. And I could sense something else. I wasn't alone in the room. There were others. I couldn't see them, couldn't interact with them, but I could feel their presence. Other drivers who'd made the same mistake I had, who'd stayed past the critical time and ended up in the counting room. How many were there? Dozens? Hundreds? The counting reached 5,000 after a month. By then, I could barely function in normal reality. The sensation of being in the room was stronger than being in the real world. I'd look around and see the inside of my truck, but I'd feel the concrete walls. I'd hear traffic and voices, but underneath it all was the relentless counting. I stopped driving, had to. It wasn't safe anymore. I moved into a small apartment in Portland trying to follow Hayes's advice. Surrounded myself with noise, TV always on, music playing, windows open to let in street sounds. It helped, but only slightly. The counting was always louder than anything else. 8,642, 8,643. I tried going to the rest area one more time. Thought maybe if I physically returned, I could break the connection. Free myself from the room. I drove down to Southern Oregon, found the exit, took the access road to the rest area. It looked different. The parking lot was cracked and weed-grown. The building was dark, windows broken. The lights were off. Like the place had been abandoned for years. But when I checked the time, it was 1:52 a.m. And as I watched, other trucks started arriving. Pulled into the lot, parked. Drivers went inside the building that looked abandoned to me but was apparently functioning for them. I was seeing two versions of reality, the abandoned rest area and the active one, overlaid on each other. 2:17 a.m. approached. The trucks started leaving one by one. I stayed in my vehicle watching. The moment hit. The light changed to blue, the sound disappeared, and the counting began. But this time I heard more than just counting. I heard screaming. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all screaming in unison. The sound was overwhelming, painful. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The screaming wasn't external. It was in my head. In the counting room where part of me still sat on that metal chair. The other drivers in the room. They weren't just sitting there counting. They were screaming. Had been screaming this whole time, but I hadn't been able to hear it until now. I drove away as fast as I could, but the screaming followed me, merged with the counting, creating a horrible cacophony that made it impossible to think. 10,215, 10,216. The counting was louder now, amplified by the screams. It filled my mind, drowning out everything else. I made it back to Portland somehow. Don't remember the drive. Just remember arriving at my apartment, stumbling inside, collapsing on the floor. The counting and screaming continued for hours, or maybe days. Time lost meaning. I existed in the counting room more than in the real world now. Finally, the screaming faded, but the counting remained, louder than ever. 15,791. I realized what was happening. The rest area wasn't just changing my perception. It was pulling me in. Slowly, gradually, the counting room was becoming more real than reality, and eventually, I'd be there completely. My body would be here, but my mind would be gone, trapped in that concrete room forever. I had to do something, had to find a way to break the connection before it was too late. I started researching. Not online, where there was nothing useful, but in libraries. Old books about highway construction, local history, paranormal phenomena. Anything that might give me a clue about what these rest areas were and why they existed. And finally, I found something. A reference in an old newspaper article from 1981. A rest area in southern Oregon had been closed after several drivers reported strange experiences. The article didn't go into detail, just mentioned that the facility was being decommissioned, and drivers were advised to use alternate rest stops. But there was a name mentioned, a maintenance worker who'd been the last person to officially work at the rest area before it closed. Michael Wyatt. I found him 3 days later, living in a nursing home in Eugene. He was in his 80s now, frail and tired, but his mind was sharp. "You're asking about the rest area," he said, when I explained why I was there. "You stayed past the time, didn't you?" 2:17. How did you know? Because everyone who comes asking has the same look. That faraway expression, like they're listening to something no one else can hear. You're counting right now, aren't you? Even as we talk. And 23,411. 23,412, yes. I can't make it stop. Wyatt nodded slowly. I worked at that rest area for 3 years. Maintained the facilities, kept things running, and I noticed the pattern. Every night around 2 a.m. all the drivers would leave. Every single one, like clockwork. Why 2:17? What's special about that time? Nothing. It's arbitrary, or maybe not. The time varies by rest area, but it's always in that 2 to 3 a.m. range. The dead hours, people call them, when reality is thinnest. What is that place? What's the counting room? Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. I don't think it's a place, exactly. I think it's a state, a condition. You stayed too long in a space that's not quite normal, and now part of you is stuck between states, between here and there, between real and unreal. How do I fix it? You can't, not completely, but you can learn to live with it. The counting will never stop, but you can learn to push it into the background. Make it quiet enough that you can function. How? By accepting it. Stop fighting it. Stop trying to make it go away. Acknowledge that it's part of you now, that you'll hear it forever, and then let it be. The more you resist, the louder it gets. That was 6 months ago. Wyatt was right. The counting never stops. It's at 67,492 right now, and it will keep going forever. But I've learned to live with it. Learned to push it far enough back that I can function most of the time. Some days are better than others. Some days the counting is just a whisper in the back of my mind. Other days it's overwhelming, and I have to stay in my apartment with all the lights on and the TV loud just to feel grounded in reality. I don't drive trucks anymore. Can't. The risk is too high. What if I dissociate while driving? What if I end up fully in the counting room while my truck is going 70 on the highway? I got a job in Portland. Office work, data entry, mind-numbing and boring but safe. And the ambient noise of the office helps drown out the counting. But I've learned things. Things I wish I didn't know. The counting room isn't just one room. It's many rooms, all connected. Every person who gets trapped has their own room, but we can sense each other. Feel each other's presence through the walls, and there are a lot of us. Hundreds, maybe thousands. All sitting in our concrete rooms counting, unable to leave. Some have been there for decades. I can feel them, the ones whose counts are in the millions. They're more there than here, barely present in reality anymore. Just shells going through the motions while their true selves sit in those rooms, counting forever. I've tried warning other drivers. Tried posting online about the 2:17 rule in the counting rooms. But nobody believes me. They think it's creative writing, or that I'm mentally ill, or that it's some kind of joke. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe fewer drivers knowing means fewer drivers stopping at those rest areas. Fewer people ending up like me. But I also know that some people will stop regardless, will ignore the warnings, will stay past the critical time, will end up in the counting room. Because that's human nature. We see danger and we're drawn to it. We hear warnings and we ignore them, just like I did. The counting is at 67,501 now. It increases by 1 every 3 seconds or so. Do the math and you'll realize it will never stop. In a year, it'll be over 10 million. In 10 years, over 100 million. And I'll hear every single number. I've thought about ending it, ending my life, freeing myself from the counting. But I don't know if that would work. Would death free me, or would I just be stuck in the counting room permanently without even the connection to reality that lets me exist here? I can't risk it. So I keep going. Keep living my quiet life in Portland, counting to infinity. The worst part isn't the counting itself. It's the knowledge that I'm not alone. That there are thousands of others out there living normal lives on the surface but spending every moment of their existence sitting in those concrete rooms, trapped by their own curiosity. And new people join us all the time. I can feel when someone new enters the counting room. Can sense their confusion and fear as they realize what's happened. And I know that eventually they'll end up like me. Like all of us. Functioning but broken, present but absent. Last night, I felt 3 new people join. 3 more drivers who ignored the warnings and stayed past their rest area's critical time. 3 more concrete rooms added to the endless network. I wanted to reach out, to tell them it would be okay, that they'd learn to live with it. But I can't communicate with them, can only sense their presence as they begin their own eternal counts. The counting is at 67,138 now. Another day, another 28,800 numbers. In a month, that'll be 864,000 more. In a year, 10,512,000. I don't sleep well anymore. When I do sleep, I dream of the counting room. See it clearly in ways I can't when I'm awake. The concrete walls, the metal chair, the locked door. And through the walls I can hear the others, all of us counting together, our voices merged into a single, endless stream of numbers. Sometimes I wonder if there's a purpose to it, if the counting serves some function we don't understand. But I don't think there is. I think it's just what happens when you stay too long in places that exist between states. You get caught in a loop, counting forever, trapped by your own curiosity. I went back to the rest area one more time, 3 months ago. Drove down to Southern Oregon, pulled into the parking lot at 1:30 a.m., watched as other drivers came and went, all leaving by 2:16. I stayed, watched the clock tick down to 2:17, waited for the light to change, the sound to disappear, the counting to begin. But nothing happened. The rest area looked normal. No blue light, no silence, no counting. Just a regular rest stop with regular lighting and regular ambient noise. Because I was already in the counting room. I'd been there for months. The rest area couldn't trap me again because it already had me. I sat there until dawn, watching the sun come up over the empty parking lot. And I realized that this was my life now. Forever trapped between 2 states, always counting, never free. The counting is at 67,584 now. By the time you read this, it'll be higher. By the time you forget this story, it'll be higher still. And I'll still be here, counting along with thousands of others, trapped by a single moment of curiosity. If you ever see a rest area where all the trucks leave at a specific time, don't question it. Don't investigate. Just leave with them. Because once you stay past that time, once you hear the counting begin, you become part of it. Forever. I'm at 67,629 now. The count continues. It will always continue. And somewhere, right now, another driver is pulling into a rest area at 1:45 a.m. They'll see the other trucks leaving. They'll be curious about why. They'll ignore the warnings. And at 2:17, they'll hear the counting begin. And they'll become number 67,630. Or maybe they already are. Maybe you are. Can you hear it? The counting? If you listen carefully in the quiet moments, you might catch it. Faint and distant, but there. 67,647. 67,648. It's there. It's always there. You just have to listen. And once you hear it, once you really hear it, you'll realize something. You've been counting along with us this whole time. Welcome to the counting room. We've been waiting for you. The count is at 67,661 now. No, wait. 6762, 6763, 67,664. Can you hear it now? Of course you can. You've always heard it. You just didn't realize what it was. But now you do. And now you'll count forever. Just like me. Just like all of us. 67,671, 6762, 67,673. The counting never stops. And neither will you. 2:17 is not a time. It's a warning. And you didn't listen. None of us did. 67,689, 67,690, 67,691. I need to tell you something else. Something I discovered in the last few weeks during my increasingly rare moments of clarity. The counting isn't random. It's not just measuring time or claiming consciousness. It's building something. Every number is a piece. Every counter is contributing to a structure we can't fully perceive. When I reach deep into the network of rooms, when I sense all the others counting simultaneously, I can feel it. The shape of something vast being constructed, one number at a time. 67,712. 67,713. Some of the longest-term counters, the ones in the billions, they're no longer individuals. They've merged into the structure itself, become load-bearing elements in whatever is being built. They don't count anymore, they are the count, and we're all moving toward that. All of us in our concrete rooms, adding our numbers to the infinite edifice. 67,774. 67,775. Marcus finally disappeared last week. I felt it happen. His room went silent, not empty but transformed. His consciousness had been fully integrated. He'd become part of the architecture. James is close. Elizabeth is closer. Thomas might already be gone. I haven't sensed him in days. And me, I'm at 67,749 now. Still individual, still separate. But the pull is getting stronger. The structure wants me, needs me. Every number brings me closer to that final integration. 67,756, 67,757. You're wondering if this is real, if I'm just a creative writer, spinning a creepy story for internet points. That's what I'd think too, if I were reading this. But here's the thing. You've been counting along with me, haven't you? Not consciously, maybe. But some part of you has been tracking the numbers as they appear. Your brain has been following the progression. 67,781. Did you notice you just counted with me? Even if you didn't read the number aloud, your mind processed it, acknowledged it, added it to the sequence. That's how it starts. 67,772. The rest areas with time limits aren't the only entry points. They're just the most obvious ones. But the counting room has many doors, many ways in, and some of them are more subtle than a physical location. Sometimes all it takes is attention, focus, the act of counting along with someone who's already trapped. 67,814. You've been reading this for a while now, following my story, tracking the numbers. Your consciousness has been syncing with mine, aligning with the rhythm of the count. Can you feel it yet? That faint sensation in the back of your mind. Like there's a room behind your awareness, dark and concrete, with a chair that's waiting for you. 67,839. Don't panic, it's probably nothing. Most people can read this and walk away unaffected. The connection isn't strong enough from just reading. You need direct experience, usually. You need to stay at one of those rest areas past the critical time. Usually, but not always. 67,163. Have you been hearing anything unusual lately? A faint voice in quiet moments? Counting, perhaps? Numbers that aren't quite your own thoughts, but aren't quite external either? If you have, I'm sorry. I tried to warn you at the beginning. Tried to make this just a story, just words on a screen. But the counting has its own agenda. It wants to grow. Wants more rooms, more counters, more numbers feeding into the structure. And sometimes attention is enough. 67,891. I can sense new rooms appearing in the network. Not many, but a few. Small, faint presences. People who read too deeply, focused too intently, counted along too carefully. I hope you're not one of them. I genuinely do. But if you are, if you're starting to feel that pull, that sense of being in two places at once, well, welcome. We've been waiting for you. 67,919. The counting will start quiet. Just a whisper in idle moments. You'll think it's your imagination. You'll dismiss it. But it will grow. Slowly, inevitably, it will grow. And one day, maybe weeks from now, maybe months, you'll be sitting somewhere quiet and suddenly you'll be aware of the count. Your count, your number. And you'll realize it's higher than you thought. That you've been counting without knowing it. That's when you'll understand. That's when you'll know you're one of us now. 67,951. I'm fading again. The room is pulling me back. This might be my last moment of clarity for a long time. Maybe forever. If you're reading this and you feel nothing, no pull, no counting, no room in your peripheral awareness, good. Close this window. Forget about it. Move on with your life and never think about rest areas or counting or 2:17 a.m. again. But if you feel something, if there's even a whisper of a count in your mind right now,